Maurine. By Ella Wheeler Wilcox. Part 1. I sat and sewed, and sang some tender tune. Oh, beauteous was that morn in early June. Mellow with sunlight, and with blossoms fair, the climbing rose tree grew about me there, and checked with shade the sunny portico, where, morns like this, I came to read, or sew. I heard the gate click, and a firm quick tread, upon the walk. No need to turn my head, I would mistake, and doubt my own voice sounding, before his step upon the gravel bounding. In an unstudied attitude of grace, he stretched his comely form, and from his face, he tossed the dark, damp curls, and at my knees, with his broad hat he fanned the lazy breeze, and turned his head, and lifted his large eyes, of that strange hue we see in ocean dyes, and call it blue sometimes, and sometimes green, and save in poet eyes, not elsewhere seen. Lest I should meet with my fair lady scorning, for calling quite so early in the morning, I've brought a passport that can never fail, he said, and, laughing, laid the morning mail upon my lap. I'm welcome? So I thought. I'll figure by the letters that I brought, how glad you are to see me. Only one? And that one from a lady? I'm undone. That, lightly skimmed, you'll think me such a bore, and wonder why I did not bring you for. It's ever thus, a woman cannot get so many letters that she will not fret over one that did not come. I'll prove you wrong, I answered gaily, here upon the spot. This little letter, precious if not long, is just the one, of all you might have brought, to please me. You have heard me speak, I'm sure, of Helen Trevor. She writes here to say, she's coming out to see me, and will stay till autumn, maybe. She is, like her note, petite and dainty, tender, loving, pure. You'd know her by a letter that she wrote, for a sweet, tinted thing. It is always so, letters all blots, though finely written, show a slovenly person. Letters stiff and white, bespeak a nature honest, plain, upright. And tissue, tinted, perfumed notes, like this, tell of a creature formed to pet and kiss. My listener heard me with a slow, odd smile, stretched in abandon at my feet, the while he fanned me idly with his broad-brimmed hat. Then all young ladies must be formed for that. He laughed, and said, their letters read, and look, as like as 20 copies of one book. They are written in a dainty, spider scrawl, to darling, precious Kate, or Fan, or Moll. The dearest, sweetest friend they ever had. They say they want to see you, oh, so bad. Vow they'll forget you, never, never, oh. And then they tell about a splendid beau, a lovely hat, a charming dress, and send a little scrap of this to every friend. And then to close, for lack of something better, they beg you'll read and burn this horrid letter. He watched me, smiling. He was prone to vex, and hector me with flings upon my sex. He liked, he said, to have me flash and frown, so he could tease me, and then laugh me down. My storms of wrath amused him very much, he liked to see me go off at a touch, anger became me, made my color rise, and gave an added luster to my eyes. So he would talk, and so he watched me now, to see the hot flush mantle cheek and brow. Instead, I answered coolly, with a smile, felling a scene with utmost care, meanwhile. The caustic tongue of Vivian Dangerfield is barbed as ever, for my sex, this morn. Still unconvinced, no smallest point I yield. Woman I love, and trust, despite your scorn. There is some truth in what you say? Well, yes. Your statements usually hold more or less. Some women write weak letters, some men do winking smiley. Some make professions, knowing them untrue. And woman's friendship, in the time of need, I own, too often proves a broken reed. But I believe, and ever will contend, woman can be a sister woman's friend, giving from out her large heart's bounteous store, a living love, claiming to do no more, than, through and by that love, she knows she can, and living by her professions, like a man. And such a tie, true friendship's silken tether, binds Helen Trevor's heart and mine together. I love her for her beauty, meekness, grace, for her white lily soul and angel face. She loves me, for my greatest strength, maybe, loves, and would give her heart's best blood for me, and I, to save her from a pain, or cross, would suffer any sacrifice or loss. Such can be woman's friendship for another. Could man give more, or ask more from a brother? I paused, and Vivian leaned his massive head against the pillar of the portico, smiled his slow, skeptic smile, then laughed, and said, "Nay, surely not, if what you say be so. You've made a statement, but no proofs at hand. Wait, do not flash your eyes so. Understand, I think you quite sincere in what you say. You love your friend, and she loves you, today, but friendship is not friendship at the best, till circumstances put it to the test. Man's, less demonstrative, stands strain and tear, while woman's, half-profession, fails to wear. Two women love each other passing well, say Helen Trevor and Maurine La Pelle, just for example. Let them daily meet, at ball and concert, in the church and street, they kiss and coo, they visit, chat, caress, their love increases, rather than grows less, and all goes well, till Helen dear discovers that Maurine darling wins too many lovers. And then her precious friend, her pet, her sweet, becomes a minx, a creature all deceit. Let Helen smile too oft on Maurine's beau, or wear more stylish or becoming clothes, or sport a hat that has a longer feather, and lo! The strain has broken friendship's tether. Maurine's sweet smile becomes a frown or pout, she's just begun to find that Helen out, the breach grows wider, anger fills each heart, they drift asunder, whom but death could part. You shake your head. Oh, well, we'll never know. It is not likely fate will test you so. You'll live, and love, and, meeting twice a year, while life shall last, you'll hold each other dear. I pray it may be so, it were not best, to shake your faith in woman by the test. Keep your belief, and nurse it while you can. I've faith in woman's friendship too, for man. They are true as steel, as mothers, friends, and wives, and that's enough to bless us all our lives. That man's a selfish fellow, and a bore, who is unsatisfied, and asks for more. But there is need of more. I here broke in. I hold that woman guilty of a sin, who would not cling to, and defend another, as nobly as she would stand by a brother. Who would not suffer for a sister's sake, and, were there need to prove her friendship, make most any sacrifice, nor count the cost. Who would not do this for a friend is lost to every nobler principle. Shame, shame, cried Vivian, laughing, for you now defame the whole sweet sex, since there's not one would do the thing you name, nor would I want her to. I love the sex. My mother was a woman, I hope my wife will be, and wholly human. And if she wants to make some sacrifice, I'll think her far more sensible and wise, to let her husband reap the benefit, instead of some old maid or senseless chit. Selfish? Of course. I hold all love is so, and I shall love my wife right well, I know. Now there's a point regarding selfish love, you thirst to argue with me, and disprove. But since these cozy hours will soon be gone, and all our meetings broken in upon, no more of these rare moments must be spent in vain discussions, or in argument. I wish Miss Trevor was in Jericho. You see the selfishness begins to show. She wants to see you. So do I, but she will gain her wish by taking you from me. Come all the same, that means I'll be allowed to realize that three can make a crowd. I do not like to feel myself de trop. With two girl cronies would I not be so? My ring would interrupt some private chat. You'd ask me in and take my cane and hat, and speak about the lovely summer day, and think, the lout. I wish he'd kept away. Miss Trevor'd smile, but just to hide a pout, and count the moments till I was shown out. And, while I twirled my thumbs, I would sit wishing that I had gone off hunting birds, or fishing. No, thanks, Maurine. The iron hand of fate, or otherwise Miss Trevor's dainty fingers, will bar my entrance into Eden's gate, and I shall be like some poor soul that lingers at heaven's portal, paying the price of sin, yet hoping to be pardoned and let in. He looked so melancholy sitting there, I laughed outright. How well you act a part, you look the very picture of despair. You've missed your calling, sir. Suppose you start upon a starring tour and carve your name, with booths and barretts on the heights of fame. But now, tabooing nonsense, I shall send for you to help me entertain my friend, unless you come without it. Cronies? True. Wanting our private chats as cronies do, and we'll take those, while you are reading Greek, or writing lines to Dora's brow or cheek. But when you have an hour or two of leisure, call as you now do, and afford like pleasure. For never yet did heaven's sun shine on, or stars discover, that phenomenon, in any country, or in any clime, two maids so bound, by ties of mind and heart. They did not feel the heavy weight of time, in weeks of scenes wherein no man took part. God made the sexes to associate, nor law of man, nor stern decree of fate, can ever undo what his hand has done, and, quite alone, make happy either one. My Helen is an only child, a pet, of loving parents, and she never yet has been denied one boon for which she pleaded. A fragile thing, her lightest wish was heeded. Would she pluck roses? They must first be shorn, by careful hands, of every hateful thorn. And loving eyes must scan the pathway where her feet may tread, to see no stones are there. She'll grow dull here, in this secluded nook, unless you aid me in the pleasant task of entertaining. Drop in with your book, read, talk, sing for her sometimes. What I ask, do once, to please me, then there'll be no need for me to state the case again, or plead. There's nothing like a woman's grace and beauty to waken mankind to a sense of duty. I bow before the mandate of my queen. Your slightest wish is law, ma belle Maurine. He answered smiling, I'm at your command. Point but one lily finger, or your wand, and you will find a willing slave obeying. There goes my dinner bell. I hear it saying, I've spent 2 hours here, lying at your feet, not profitable, maybe, surely sweet. All time is money, now were I to measure the time I spend here by its solid pleasure, and that were coined in dollars, then I've laid each day a fortune at your feet, fair maid. There goes that bell again. I'll say goodbye, or clouds will shadow my domestic sky. I'll come again, as you would have me do, and see your friend, while she is seeing you. That's like by proxy being at a feast, unsatisfactory, to say the least. He drew his fine shape up and trod the land, with kingly grace. Passing the gate, his hand, he lightly placed the garden wall upon, leaped over like a leopard, and was gone. And, going, took the brightness from the place, yet left the June day with a sweeter grace, and my young soul so steeped in happy dreams, heaven itself seemed shown to me in gleams. There is a time with lovers, when the heart first slowly rouses from its dreamless sleep, to all the tumult of a passion life, ere yet have wakened jealousy and strife. Just as a young, untutored child will start out of a long hour's slumber, sound and deep, and lie and smile with rosy lips and cheeks, in a sweet, restful trance, before it speaks. A time when yet no word the spell has broken, save what the heart unto the soul has spoken, in quickened throbs, and sighs but half suppressed. A time when that sweet truth, all unconfessed, gives added fragrance to the summer flowers, a golden glory to the passing hours, a hopeful beauty to the plainest face, and lends to life a new and tender grace. When the full heart has climbed the heights of bliss, and, smiling, looks back over the golden past, I think it finds no sweeter hour than this, in all love life. For, later, when the last translucent drop overflows the cup of joy, and love, more mighty than the heart's control, surges in words of passion from the soul, and vows are asked and given, shadows rise, like mists before the sun in noonday skies, vague fears, that prove the brimming cup's alloy, a dread of change, the crowning moment's curse, since what is perfect, change but renders worse, a vain desire to cripple time, who goes, bearing our joys away, and bringing woes. And later, doubts and jealousies awaken, and plighted hearts are tempest-tossed, and shaken. Doubt sends a test, that goes a step too far, a wound is made, that, healing, leaves a scar, or one heart, full with love's sweet satisfaction, thinks truth once spoken always understood, while one is pining for the tender action, and whispered word by which, of old, it was wooed. But this blessed hour, in love's glad, golden day, is like the dawning, ere the radiant ray of glowing soul has burst upon the eye, but yet is heralded in earth and sky, warm with its fervor, mellow with its light, while care still slumbers in the arms of night. But hope, awake, hears happy birdlings sing, and thinks of all a summer day may bring. In this sweet calm, my young heart lay at rest, filled with a blissful sense of peace, nor guessed that sullen clouds were gathering in the skies, to hide the glorious sun, ere it should rise. Part 2. To little birds that never tire of humming about the garden in the summer weather, Aunt Ruth compared us, after Helen's coming, as we two roamed, or sat and talked together. 12 months apart, we had so much to say, of school days gone, and time since passed away, of that old friend, and this, of what we'd done, of how our separate paths in life had run, of what we would do, in the coming years, of plans and castles, hopes and dreams and fears. All these, and more, as soon as we found speech, we touch upon, and skimmed from this to that, but at the first, each only gazed on each, and, dumb with joy, that did not need a voice, like lesser joys, to say, Lo! I rejoice. With smiling eyes and clasping hands we sat, wrapped in that peace, felt but with those dear, contented just to know each other near. But when this silent eloquence gave place to words, it was like the rising of a flood, above a dam. We sat there, face to face, and let our talk glide on wherever it would, speech never halting in its speed or zest, save when our rippling laughter let it rest, just as a stream will sometimes pause and play about a bubbling spring, then dash away. No wonder, then, the third day sun was nigh up to the zenith when my friend and I opened our eyes from slumber long and deep, nature demanding recompense for hours spent in the portico, among the flowers, halves of 2 nights we should have spent in sleep. So this third day, we breakfasted at 1, then walked about the garden in the sun, hearing the thrushes and the robins sing, and looking to see what buds were opening. The clock chimed 3, and we yet strayed at will about the yard in morning dishabille, when Aunt Ruth came, with apron over her head, holding a letter in her hand, and said, Here is a note, from Vivian I opine, at least his servant brought it. And now, girls, you may think this is no concern of mine, but in my day young ladies did not go, till almost bedtime roaming to and from, in morning wrappers, and with tangled curls, the very pictures of forlorn distress. It is 3 o'clock, and time for you to dress. Come. Read your note and hurry in, Maurine, and make yourself fit object to be seen. Helen was bending over an almond bush, and ere she looked up I had read the note, and calmed my heart, that, bounding, sent a flush to brow and cheek, at sight of aught he wrote. Ma belle Maurine, so Vivian's billet ran, is it not time I saw your cherished guest? Pity the sorrows of a poor young man, banished from all that makes existence blessed. I'm dying to see your friend, and I will come and pay respects, hoping you'll be at home tonight at 8. Expectantly, V.D. Inside my belt I slipped the billet, saying, Helen, go make yourself most fair to see, quick. Hurry now. No time for more delaying. In just 5 hours a caller will be here, and you must look your prettiest, my dear. Begin your toilet right away. I know how long it takes you to arrange each bow, to twist each curl and loop your skirts aright. And you must prove you are au fait tonight, and make a perfect toilet, for our caller is man, and critic, poet, artist, scholar, and views with eyes of all. Oh, oh. Maurine, cried Helen with a well-feigned look of fear, you've frightened me so I shall not appear, I'll hide away, refusing to be seen by such an ogre. Woe is me! Bereft of all my friends, my peaceful home I've left, and strayed away into the dreadful wood, to meet the fate of poor Red Riding Hood. No, Maurine, no. You've given me such a fright, I'll not go near your ugly wolf tonight. Meantime we'd left the garden, and I stood in Helen's room, where she had thrown herself upon a couch, and lay, a winsome elf, pouting and smiling, cheek upon her arm, not in the least a portrait of alarm. Now, sweet, I coaxed, and knelt by her, be good. Go curl your hair, and please your own Maurine, by putting on that lovely grenadine. Not wolf, nor ogre, neither Caliban, nor Mephistopheles, you'll meet tonight, but what the ladies call a nice young man. Yet one worth knowing, strong with health and might, of perfect manhood, gifted, noble, wise, moving among his kind with loving eyes, and helpful hand, progressive, brave, refined, after the image of his Maker's mind. Now, Maurine, cried Helen, I believe it is your lover coming here this eve. Why have you never written of him, pray? Is the day set? And when? Say, Maurine, say. Had I betrayed by some too fervent word the secret love that all my being stirred? My lover? My heart proclaimed him so, but first his lips must win the sweet confession, ere even Helen be allowed to know. I must straightway erase the slight impression made by the words just uttered. Foolish child! I gaily cried, your fancy's straying wild. Just let a girl of 18 hear the name of maiden youth uttered about one time, and off her fancy goes, at breakneck pace, defying circumstances, reason, space, and straightway builds romances so sublime, they put all Shakespeare's dramas to the shame. This Vivian Dangerfield is neighbor, friend, and kind companion, bringing books and flowers. And, by his thoughtful actions without end, helping me pass some otherwise long hours, but he has never breathed a word of love. If you still doubt me, listen while I prove my statement by the letter that he wrote. Dying to meet, my friend. She could not see the dash between that meant so much to me. Will come this eve, at 8, and hopes we may be in to greet him. Now I think you'll say, "'Tis not much like a lover's tender note." We laugh, we jest, not meaning what we say, we hide our thoughts, by light words lightly spoken, and pass on heedless, till we find one day, they've bruised our hearts, or left some other broken. I sought my room, and trilling some blithe air, opened my wardrobe, wondering what to wear. Momentous question. Femininely human. More than all others, vexing mind of woman, since that sad day, when in her discontent, to search for leaves, our fair first mother went. All undecided what I should put on, at length I made selection of a lawn, white, with a tiny pink vine overrun, my simplest robe, but Vivian's favorite one. And placing a single flower in my hair, I crossed the hall to Helen's chamber, where I found her with her fair locks all let down, brushing the kinks out, with a pretty frown. It was like a picture, or a pleasing play, to watch her make her toilet. She would stand, and turn her head first this and then that way, trying effect of ribbon, bow or band. Then she would pick up something else, and curve her lovely neck, with cunning, bird-like grace, and watch the mirror while she put it on, with such a sweetly grave and thoughtful face, and then to view it all would sway, and swerve, her lithe young body, like a graceful swan. Helen was over medium height, and slender, even to frailty. Her great, wistful eyes were like the deep blue of autumnal skies, and through them looked her soul, large, loving, tender. Her long, light hair was lustreless, except upon the ends, where burnished sunbeams slept, and on the ear locks, and she looped the curls back with a shell comb, studded thick with pearls, costly yet simple. Her pale loveliness, that night, was heightened by her rich, black dress, that trailed behind her, leaving half in sight her taper arms and shoulders marble white. I was not tall as Helen, and my face was shaped and colored like my grandsire's race, for through his veins my own received the warm, red blood of southern France, which curved my form, and glowed upon my cheek in crimson dyes, and bronzed my hair, and darkled in my eyes. And as the morning trails the skirts of night, and dusky night puts on the garb of morn, and walk together when the day is born, so we two glided down the hall and stair, arm clasping arm, into the parlor, where sat Vivian, bathed in sunset's gorgeous light. He rose to greet us. Oh! His form was grand, and he possessed that power, strange, occult, called magnetism, lacking better word, which moves the world, achieving great result, where genius fails completely. Touch his hand, it thrilled through all your being, meet his eye, and you were moved, yet knew not how, or why. Let him but rise, you felt the air was stirred by an electric current. This strange force is mightier than genius. Rightly used, it leads to grand achievements, all things yield before its mystic presence, and its field is broad as earth and heaven. But abused, it sweeps like a poisoned simoon on its course, bearing miasma in its scorching breath, and leaving all it touches struck with death. Far-reaching science shall yet tear away the mystic garb that hides it from the day, and drag it forth and bind it with its laws, and make it serve the purposes of men, guided by common sense and reason. Then, we'll hear no more of scenes, table rapping, and all that trash, over which the world is gaping, lost in effect, while science seeks the cause. Vivian was not conscious of his power, or, if he was, knew not its full extent. He knew his glance would make a wild beast cower, and yet he knew not that his large eyes sent into the heart of woman the same thrill that made the lion servant of his will. And even strong men felt it. He arose, reached forth his hand, and in it clasped my own, while I held Helen's, and he spoke some word of pleasant greeting in his low, round tone, unlike all other voices I have heard. Just as the white cloud, at the sunrise, glows with roseate colors, so the pallid hue of Helen's cheek, like tinted seashells, grew. Through mine, his hand caused hers to tremble, such was the all-mastering magic of his touch. Then we sat down, and talked about the weather, the neighborhood, some author's last new book. But, when I could, I left the two together, to make acquaintance, saying I must look after the chickens, my especial care, and ran away, and left them, laughing, there. Knee-deep, through clover, to the poplar grove, I waded, where my pets were wont to rove, and there I found the foolish mother hen, brooding her chickens underneath a tree, an easy prey for foxes. Chickadee, quoth I, while reaching for the downy things, that, chirping, peeped from out the mother wings, how very human is your folly! When there waits a haven, pleasant, bright, and warm, and one to lead you thither from the storm, and lurking dangers, yet you turn away. And, thinking to be your own protector, stray into the open jaws of death, for, see, an owl is sitting in this very tree, you thought safe shelter. Go now to your pen. And, followed by the clucking, clamorous hen, so like the human mother here again, moaning because a strong, protecting arm would shield her little ones from cold and harm, I carried back my garden hat brimful of chirping chickens, like white balls of wool, and snugly housed them. And just then I heard a sound like gentle winds among the trees, or pleasant waters in the summer, stirred and set in motion by a passing breeze. It was Helen singing, and, as I drew near, another voice, a tenor full and clear, mingled with hers, as murmuring streams unite, and flow on stronger in their wedded might. It was a way of Helen's, not to sing the songs that other people sang. She took, sometimes an extract from an ancient book, again some floating, fragmentary thing, and such she fitted to old melodies, or else composed the music. One of these she sang that night, and Vivian caught the strain, and joined her in the chorus, or refrain, song. O thou, mine other, stronger part, whom yet I cannot hear, or see, come thou, and take this loving heart, that longs to yield its all to thee, I call mine own, oh, come to me. Love, answer back, I come to thee, I come to thee. This hungry heart, so warm, so large, is far too great a care for me. I have grown weary of the charge I keep so sacredly for thee. Come thou, and take my heart from me. Love, answer back, I come to thee, I come to thee. I am aweary, waiting here, for one who tarries long from me. Oh! Art thou far, or art thou near? And must I still be sad for thee? Or wilt thou straightway come to me? Love, answer, I am near to thee, I come to thee. The melody, so full of plaintive chords, sobbed into silence, echoing down the strings, like voice of one who walks from us, and sings. Vivian had leaned upon the instrument, the while they sang. But, as he spoke those words, Love, I am near to thee, I come to thee, he turned his grand head slowly round, and bent his lustrous, soulful, speaking gaze on me. And my young heart, eager to own its king, sent to my eyes a great, glad, trustful light of love and faith, and hung upon my cheek hope's rose-hued flag. There was no need to speak. I crossed the room and knelt by Helen. Sing that song you sang a fragment of one night, out on the porch, beginning, Praise me not. I whispered, and her sweet and plaintive tone rose, low and tender, as if she had caught, from some sad passing breeze, and made her own, the echo of the wind-harp's sighing strain, or the soft music of the falling rain. Song. Oh, praise me not with your lips, dear one, though your tender words I prize. But dearer by far is the soulful gaze of your eyes, your beautiful eyes, your tender, loving eyes. Oh, chide me not with your lips, dear one, though I cause your bosom sighs. You can make repentance deeper far, by your sad, reproving eyes, your sorrowful, troubled eyes. Words, at the best, are but hollow sounds. Above, in the beaming skies, the constant stars say never a word, but only smile with their eyes, smile on with their lustrous eyes. Then breathe no vow with your lips, dear one, on the winged wind speech flies. But I read the truth of your noble heart, in your soulful, speaking eyes, in your deep and beautiful eyes. The twilight darkened around us, in the room, while Helen sang, and, in the gathering gloom, Vivian reached out, and took my hand in his, and held it so, while Helen made the air languid with music. Then a step drew near, and voice of Aunt Ruth broke the spell. Dear! Dear! Why Maury, Helen, children? How is this? I hear you, but you have no light in there. Your room is dark as Egypt. What a way, for folks to visit. Maury, go, I pray, and order lamps. And so there came a light, and all the sweet dreams hovering around, the twilight shadows flitted in affright, and even the music had a harsher sound. In pleasant converse passed an hour away, and Vivian planned a picnic for next day, a drive the next, and rambles without end, that he might help me entertain my friend. And then he rose, bowed low, and passed from sight, like some great star that drops out from the night, and Helen watched him through the shadows go, and turned and said, her voice subdued and low, how tall he is! In all my life, Maurine, a grander man I never yet have seen. Part 3. One golden 12th part of a checkered year, one summer month, of sunlight, moonlight, mirth, with not a hint of shadows lurking near, or storm clouds brewing. It was a royal day, voluptuous July held her lover, Earth, with her warm arms, upon her glowing breast, and twined herself about him, as he lay, smiling and panting in his dream-stirred rest. She bound him with her limbs of perfect grace, and hid him with her trailing robe of green, and wound him in her long hair's shimmering sheen, and rained her ardent kisses on his face. Through the glad glory of the summer land, Helen and I went wandering, hand in hand. In winding paths, hard by the ripe wheat field, white with the promise of a bounteous yield, across the late shorn meadow, down the hill, red with the tiger lily blossoms, till we stood upon the borders of the lake, that like a pretty, placid infant, slept, low at its base, and little ripples crept along its surface, just as dimples chase each other over an infant's sleeping face. Helen in idle hours had learned to make 1,000 pretty, feminine knickknacks, for brackets, ottomans, and toilet stands, labor just suited to her dainty hands. That morning she had been at work in wax, molding a wreath of flowers for my room, taking her patterns from the living blows, in all their dewy beauty and sweet bloom, fresh from my garden. Fuchsia, tulip, rose, and trailing ivy grew beneath her touch, resembling the living plants as much as life is copied in the form of death, these lacking but the perfume, and that, breath. And now the wreath was all completed, save the mermaid blossom of all flowerdom, a water lily, dripping from the wave. And it was in search of it that we had come, down to the lake, and wandered on the beach, to see if any lilies grew in reach. Some broken stalks, where flowers late had been, some buds, with all their beauties folded in, we found, but not the treasure that we sought, and then we turned our footsteps to the spot, where, all impatient of its chain, my boat, the Swan, rocked, asking to be set afloat. It was a dainty rowboat, strong, yet light, each side a swan was painted snowy white, a present from my uncle, just before he sailed, with death, to that mysterious strand, where freighted ships go sailing evermore, but none return to tell us of the land. I freed the Swan, and slowly rowed about, wherever seaweeds, grass, or green leaves lifted their tips above the water. So we drifted, while Helen, opposite, leaned idly out, and watched for lilies in the waves below, and softly crooned some sweet and dreamy air, that soothed me like a mother's lullabies. I dropped the oars, and closed my sun-kissed eyes, and let the boat go drifting here and there. Oh, happy day! The last of that brief time, of thoughtless youth, when all the world seems bright, ere that disguised angel men call woe, leads the sad heart through valleys dark as night, up to the heights exalted and sublime. On each blessed, happy moment, I am fain to linger long, ere I pass on to pain, and sorrow that succeeded. From daydreams, as golden as the summer noontide's beams, I was awakened by a voice that cried, "Strange ship, ahoy! fair frigate, whither bound? And, starting up, I cast my gaze around, and saw a sailboat over the water glide, close to the Swan, like some live thing of grace, and from it looked the glowing, handsome face of Vivian. Beauteous sirens of the sea, come sail across the raging main with me. He laughed, and leaning, drew our drifting boat beside his own. There, now. Step in, he said, I'll land you anywhere you want to go. My boat is safer far than yours, I know, and much more pleasant with its sails all spread. The Swan? We'll take the oars, and let it float ashore at leisure. You, Maurine, sit there, Miss Helen here. Ye gods and little fishes, I've reached the height of pleasure, and my wishes. Adieu despondency. Farewell to care. It was done so quickly, that was Vivian's way. He did not wait for either yea or nay. He gave commands, and left you with no choice, but just to do the bidding of his voice. His rare, kind smile, low tones, and manly face, lent to his quick imperiousness a grace, and winning charm, completely stripping it of what might otherwise have seemed unfit. Leaving no trace of tyranny, but just that nameless force that seemed to say, you must. Suiting its pretty title of The Dawn, so named, he said, that it might rhyme with Swan, Vivian's sailboat was carpeted with blue, while all its sails were of a pale rose hue. The daintiest craft that flirted with the breeze, a poet's fancy in an hour of ease. Whatever Vivian had was of the best. His room was like some sultan's in the East. His board was always spread as for a feast. Whereat, each meal, he was both host and guest. He would go hungry sooner than he'd dine at his own table if it were illy set. He so loved things artistic in design, order and beauty, all about him. Yet, so kind he was, if it befell his lot to dine within the humble peasant's cot, he made it seem his native soil to be, and thus displayed the true gentility. Under the rosy banners of the dawn, around the lake we drifted on, and on. It was a time for dreams, and not for speech. And so we floated on in silence, each weaving the fancies suiting such a day. Helen leaned idly over the sailboat's side, and dipped her rosy fingers in the tide, and I among the cushions half reclined, half sat, and watched the fleecy clouds at play, while Vivian with his blank book, opposite, in which he seemed to either sketch or write, was lost in inspiration of some kind. No time, no change, no scene, can ever efface my mind's impression of that hour and place. It stands out like a picture. Over the years, black with their robes of sorrow, veiled with tears, lying with all their lengthened shapes between, untouched, undimmed, I still behold that scene. Just as the last of Indian summer days, replete with sunlight, crowned with amber haze, followed by dark and desolate December, through all the months of winter we remember. The sun slipped westward. That peculiar change, which creeps into the air and speaks of night, while yet the day is full of golden light, we felt steal over us. Vivian broke the spell of dream-fraught silence, throwing down his book. Young ladies, please allow me to arrange these wraps about your shoulders. I know well the fickle nature of our atmosphere, a smile swift followed by a frown or tear, and go prepared for changes. Now you look like, oh, where's a pretty simile? Had you a pocket mirror here you'd see how well my native talent is displayed, in shawling you. Red on the brunette maid, blue on the blonde, and quite without design. Oh, where is that comparison of mine? Well, like a June rose and a violet blue, in one bouquet. I fancy that will do. And now I crave your patience and a boon, which is to listen, while I read my rhyme, a floating fancy of the summertime. It is neither witty, wonderful, nor wise, so listen kindly, but don't criticize my maiden effort of the afternoon. If all the ships I have at sea should come a-sailing home to me, well, the harbor could not hold so many sails as there would be if all my ships came in from sea. If half my ships came home from sea, and brought their precious freight to me, well, I should have wealth as great as any king who sits in state, so rich the treasures that would be in half my ships now out at sea. If just one ship I have at sea should come a-sailing home to me, well, the storm clouds then might frown, for if the others all went down, still rich and proud and glad I'd be, if that one ship came back to me. If that one ship went down at sea, and all the others came to me, weighed down with gems and wealth untold, with glory, honor, riches, gold, the poorest soul on earth I'd be, if that one ship came not to me. O skies be calm? O winds blow free, blow all my ships safe home to me. But if thou sendest some Arak, to never more come sailing back, send any, all, that skim the sea, but bring my love ship home to me. Helen was leaning by me, and her head rested against my shoulder, as he read. I stroked her hair, and watched the fleecy skies, and when he finished, did not turn my eyes. I felt too happy and too shy to meet his gaze just then. I said, "It is very sweet, and suits the day, does it not, Helen, dear?" But Helen, voiceless, did not seem to hear. "It is strange," I added, "how you poets sing so feelingly about the very thing you care not for, and dress up an ideal so well it looks a living, breathing real. Now, to a listener, your love song seemed a heart's outpouring, yet I've heard you say almost the opposite, or that you deemed position, honor, glory, power, fame, gained without loss of conscience or good name, the things to live for." "Have you?" "Well, you may," laughed Vivian, "but it was years, or months ago. And Solomon says wise men change, you know. I now speak truth. If she I hold most dear slipped from my life, and no least hope were left, my heart would find the years more lonely here than if I were of wealth, fame, friends, bereft, and sent an exile to a foreign land." His voice was low and measured as he spoke. New, unknown chords of melody awoke within my soul. I felt my heart expand with that sweet fullness born of love. I turned to hide the blushes on my cheek that burned, and leaning over Helen, breathed her name. She lay so motionless I thought she slept, but, as I spoke, I saw her eyes unclose, and over her face a sudden glory swept, and a slight tremor thrilled all through her frame. "Sweet friend," I said, "your face is full of light. What were the dreams that made your eyes so bright?" She only smiled for answer, and arose from her reclining posture at my side, threw back the clustering ringlets from her face, with a quick gesture, full of easy grace, and, turning, spoke to Vivian. "Will you guide the boat up near that little clump of green, off to the right? There's where the lilies grow. We quite forgot our errand here, Maurine, and our few moments have grown into hours. What will Aunt Ruth think of our lingering so? There, that will do, now I can reach the flowers. Hark! Just hear that," and Vivian broke forth singing, "Row, brothers, row. The 6 o'clock bell's ringing. Who ever knew 3 hours to go so fast, in all the annals of the world, before? I could have sworn not over one had passed. Young ladies, I am forced to go ashore. I thank you for the pleasure you have given. This afternoon has been a glimpse of heaven. Good night, sweet dreams. And by your gracious leave, I'll pay my compliments tomorrow eve." A smile, a bow, and he had gone his way, and, in the waning glory of the day, down cool, green lanes, and through the lengthening shadows, silent, we wandered back across the meadows. The wreath was finished, and adorned my room. Long afterward, the lily's copied bloom was like a horrid spectre in my sight, staring upon me morning, noon, and night. The sun went down. The sad new moon rose up, and passed before me, like an empty cup. The great unseen brims full of pain or bliss, and gives his children, saying, "Drink of this." A light wind, from the open casement, fanned my brow and Helen's, as we, hand in hand, sat looking out upon the twilight scene, in dreamy silence. Helen's dark blue eyes, like 2 lost stars that wandered from the skies, some night adown the meteor's shining track, and always had been grieving to go back, now gazed up, wistfully, at heaven's dome, and seemed to recognize and long for home. Her sweet voice broke the silence. "Wish, Maurine, before you speak. You know the moon is new, and anything you wish for will come true, before it wanes. I do believe the sign. Now tell me your wish, and I'll tell you mine." I turned and looked up at the slim young moon, and, with an almost superstitious heart, I sighed, "Oh, new moon! Help me, by thine art, to grow all grace and goodness, and to be worthy the love a true heart proffers me." Then smiling down, I said, "Dear one, my boon, I fear, is quite too silly or too sweet for my repeating, so we'll let it stay between the moon and me. But if I may, I'll listen now to your wish. Tell me, please." All suddenly she nestled at my feet, and hid her blushing face upon my knees. Then drew my hand against her glowing cheek, and, leaning on my breast, began to speak, half sighing out the words my tortured ear reached down to catch, while striving not to hear. "Can you not guess who it was about, Maurine? Oh, my sweet friend! You must ere this have seen the love I tried to cover from all eyes, and from myself. Ah, foolish little heart! As well it might go seeking for some art, whereby to hide the sun in noonday skies. When first the strange sound of his voice I heard, looked on his noble face, and touched his hand, my slumbering heart thrilled through, and stirred, as if to say, I hear, and understand. And day by day mine eyes were blessed beholding the inner beauty of his life, unfolding in countless words and actions, that portrayed the noble stuff of which his soul was made. And more I felt my heart a-preaching toward the truth, drawn gently by his teaching, as flowers are drawn by sunlight. And there grew a strange, shy something in its depths, I knew, at length was love, because it was so sad, and yet so sweet, and made my heart so glad, yet seemed to pain me. Then, for very shame, lest all should read my secret and its name, I strove to hide it in my breast away, where God could see it only. But each day, it seemed to grow within me, and would rise, like my own soul, and look forth from my eyes, defying bonds of silence, and would speak, in its red-lettered language, on my cheek, if but his name was uttered. You were kind, my own Maurine, as you alone could be, so long the sharer of my heart and mind, while yet you saw, in seeming not to see. In all the years we have been friends, my own, and loved as women very rarely do, my heart no sorrow and no joy has known, it has not shared at once, in full, with you, and I so longed to speak to you of this, when first I felt its mingled pain and bliss, yet dared not, lest you, knowing him, should say, in pity for my folly, lack-a-day. You are undone, because no mortal art can win the love of such a lofty heart. And so I waited, silent and in pain, till I could know I did not love in vain. And now I know, beyond a doubt or fear. Did he not say, if she I hold most dear slipped from my life, and no least hope were left, my heart would find the years more lonely here, than if I were of wealth, fame, friends, bereft, and sent, an exile, to a foreign land? Oh, darling, you must love, to understand the joy that thrilled all through me at those words. It was as if 1,000 singing birds within my heart broke forth in notes of praise. I did not look up, but I knew his gaze was on my face, and that his eyes must see the joy I felt almost transfigured me. He loves me, loves me. So the birds kept singing, and all my soul with that sweet strain is ringing. If there were added but one drop of bliss, no more my cup would hold, and so, this eve, I made a wish that I might feel his kiss upon my lips, ere yon pale moon should leave the stars all lonely, having waned away, too old and weak and bowed with care to stay. Her voice sighed into silence. While she spoke, my heart writhed in me, praying she would cease, each word she uttered falling like a stroke on my bare soul. And now a hush like death, save that it was broken by a quick-drawn breath, fell around me, but brought not the hoped-for peace. For when the lash no longer leaves its blows, the flesh still quivers, and the blood still flows. She nestled on my bosom like a child, and 'neath her head my tortured heart throbbed wild with pain and pity. She had told her tale, her self-deceiving story to the end. How could I look down on her as she lay, so fair, and sweet, and lily-like, and frail, a tender blossom on my breast, and say, "Nay, you are wrong, you do mistake, dear friend. 'Tis I am loved, not you?" Yet that were truth, and she must know it later. Should I speak, and spread a ghastly pallor over the cheek, flushed now with joy? And while I, doubting, pondered, she spoke again. "Maurine, I oft have wondered why you and Vivian were not lovers. He is all a heart could ask its king to be, and you have beauty, intellect and youth. I think it strange you have not loved each other, strange how he could pass by you for another, not half so fair or worthy. Yet I know, a loving Father prearranged it so. I think my heart has known him all these years, and waited for him. And if when he came, it had been as a lover of my friend, I should have recognized him, all the same, as my soulmate, and loved him to the end, hiding my grief, and forcing back my tears, till on my heart, slow dropping, day by day, unseen they fell, and wore it all away. And so a tender Father kept him free, with all the largeness of his love, for me, unworthy such a precious gift. Yet I will bend each effort of my life, to grow in grace and goodness, and to lift my soul and spirit to his lofty height, so to deserve that holy name, his wife. Sweet friend, it fills my whole heart with delight, to breathe its long-hid secret in your ear. Speak, my Maurine, and say you love to hear. The while she spoke, my active brain gave rise to one great thought of mighty sacrifice, and self-denial. Oh! It blanched my cheek, and wrung my soul, and from my heart it drove all life and feeling. Coward-like, I strove to send it from me, but I felt it cling, and hold fast on my mind like some live thing, and all the self within me felt its touch, and cried, no, no. I cannot do so much, I am not strong enough, there is no call. And then the voice of Helen bade me speak, and with a calmness born of nerve, I said, scarce knowing what I uttered, sweetheart, all your joys and sorrows are with mine own Wednesday. I thank you for your confidence and pray, I may deserve it always. But, dear one, something, perhaps our boat ride in the sun, has set my head to aching. I must go to bed directly, and you will, I know, grant me your pardon, and another day, we'll talk of this together. Now good night, and angels guard you with their wings of light. I kissed her lips, and held her on my heart, and viewed her as I never had done before. I gazed upon her features over and over, marked her white, tender face, her fragile form, like some frail plant that withers in the storm, saw she was fairer in her new-found joy than ever before, and thought, can I destroy God's handiwork, or leave it at the best, a broken harp, while I close clasp my bliss? I bent my head and gave her one last kiss, and sought my room, and found there such relief as sad hearts feel when first alone with grief. The moon went down, slow sailing from my sight, and left the stars to watch away the night. O stars, sweet stars, so changeless and serene! What depths of woe your pitying eyes have seen! The proud sun sets, and leaves us with our sorrow, to grope alone in darkness till the morrow. The languid moon, even if she deigns to rise, soon seeks her couch, grown weary of our sighs, but from the early gloaming till the day, sends golden-liveried heralds forth to say, he comes in might. The patient stars shine on, steadfast and faithful, from twilight to dawn. And, as they shone upon Jeth's main, and watched the struggle of a godlike soul, now from the same far height they shone on me, and saw the waves of anguish over me roll. The storm had come upon me all unseen, no sound of thunder fell upon my ear, no cloud arose to tell me it was near, but under skies all sunlit and serene, I floated with the current of the stream, and thought life all one golden haloed dream. When lo! A hurricane, with awful force, swept swift upon its devastating course, wrecked my frail bark, and cast me on the wave, where all my hopes had found a sudden grave. Love makes us blind and selfish, otherwise, I had seen Helen's secret in her eyes, so used I was to reading every look in her sweet face, as I would read a book. But now, made sightless by love's blinding rays, I had gone on unseeing, to the end, where pain dispelled the mist of golden haze, that walled me in, and lo! I found my friend, who journeyed with me, at my very side, had been sore wounded to the heart, while I, both deaf and blind, saw not, nor heard her cry. And then I sobbed, O God! I would have died, to save her this. And as I cried in pain, there leaped forth from the still, white realm of thought, where conscience dwells, that unimpassioned spot, as widely different from the heart's domain, as north from south, the impulse felt before, and put away, but now it rose once more, in greater strength, and said, Heart, wouldest thou prove what lips have uttered? Then go lay thy love on friendship's altar, as thy offering. Nay, cried my heart, ask any other thing, ask life itself, it were easier sacrifice. But ask not love, for that I cannot give. But, spoke the voice, the meanest insect dies, and is no hero. Heroes dare to live, when all that makes life sweet is snatched away. So with my heart, in converse, till the day, in gold and crimson billows, rose and broke, the voice of conscience, all unwearied, spoke. Love warred with friendship, heart with conscience fought, hours rolled away, and yet the end was not. And wily self, tricked out like tenderness, sighed, think how one, whose life thou wert to bless, will be cast down, and grope in doubt and fear. Wouldst thou wound him, to give thy friend relief? Can wrong make right? Nay. Conscience said, but pride, and time can heal the saddest hurts of love. While friendship's wounds gape wide and yet more wide, and bitter fountains of the spirit prove. At length, exhausted with the wearing strife, I cast the new-found burden of my life on God's broad breast, and sought that deep repose, that only he who watched with sorrow knows. Part 4. Maurine, Maurine. It is 10 o'clock. Arise, my pretty sluggard. Open those dark eyes, and see where yonder sun is. Do you know, I made my toilet just 4 hours ago? It was Helen's voice, and Helen's gentle kiss fell on my cheek. As from a deep abyss, I drew my weary self from that strange sleep, that rests not, nor refreshes. Scarce awake, or conscious, yet there seemed a heavy weight, bound on my breast, as by a cruel fate. I knew not why, and yet I longed to weep. Some dark cloud seemed to hang upon the day, and, for a moment, in that trance I lay, when suddenly the truth did over me break, like some great wave upon a helpless child. The dull pain in my breast grew like a knife, the heavy throbbing of my heart grew wild, and God gave back the burden of the life he kept what time I slumbered. You are ill, cried Helen, with that blinding headache still. You look so pale and weary. Now let me play nurse, Maurine, and care for you today. And first I'll suit some dainty to your taste, and bring it to you, with a cup of tea. And off she ran, not waiting my reply. But, wanting most the sunshine and the light, I left my couch, and clothed myself in haste, and, kneeling, sent to God an earnest cry, for help and guidance. Show thou me the way, where duty leads, for I am blind. My sight, obscured by self. Oh, lead my steps aright. Help me see the path, and if it may, let this cup pass, and yet thou heavenly One, thy will in all things, not mine own, be done. Rising, I went upon my way, receiving the strength prayer gives always to hearts believing. I felt that unseen hands were leading me, and knew the end was peace. What? Are you up? Cried Helen, coming with a tray and cup of tender toast and fragrant smoking tea. You naughty girl. You should have stayed in bed until you ate your breakfast and were better. I've something hidden for you here, a letter. But drink your tea before you read it, dear. It is from some distant cousin, Auntie said, and so you need not hurry. Now be good, and mind your Helen. So, in passive mood, I laid the still unopened letter near, and loitered at my breakfast more to please my nurse than any hunger to appease. Then listlessly I broke the seal and read the few lines written in a bold free hand. New London, Canada. Dear Cuz. Maurine. In spite of generations stretched between, our natural right to that most handy claim of cousinship, we'll use it all the same. I'm coming to see you. Honestly, in truth. I've threatened often, now I mean to act. You'll find my coming is a stubborn fact. Keep quiet though, and do not tell Aunt Ruth. I wonder if she'll know her petted boy, in spite of changes. Look for me until you see me coming. As of old I'm still your faithful friend and loving cousin, Roy. So Roy was coming. He and I had played, as boy and girl, and later, youth and maid, full half our lives together. He had been, like me, an orphan, and the roof of kin gave both kind shelters. Swift years sped away, ere change was felt, and then one summer day, a long-lost uncle sailed from India's shore, made Roy his heir, and he was ours no more. He'd write us daily, and we'd see his face, once every year. Such was his promise given, the morn he left. But now the years were 7, since last he looked upon the olden place. He'd been through college, travelled in all lands, sailed overseas, and trod the desert sands. Would write and plan a visit, then, ere long, would write again from Egypt or Hong Kong, some fancy called him thither unforeseen. So years had passed, till 7 lay between his going and the coming of this note, which I hid in my bosom, and replied to Aunt Ruth's queries, what the truant wrote? By saying he was still upon the wing, and merely dropped a line, while journeying, to say he lived, and she was satisfied. Sometimes it happens, in this world so strange, a human heart will pass through mortal strife, and writhe in torture, while the old sweet life, so full of hope, and beauty, bloom and grace, is slowly strangled by remorseless pain, and one stern, cold, relentless, takes its place, a ghastly, pallid spectre of the slain. Yet those in daily converse see no change, nor dream the heart has suffered. So that day, I passed along toward the troubled way, stern duty pointed, and no mortal guessed, a mighty conflict had disturbed my breast. I had resolved to yield up to my friend, the man I loved. Since she, too, loved him so, I saw no other way in honor left. She was so weak and fragile, once bereft of this great hope that held her with such power, she would wilt down, like some frostbitten flower, and swift untimely death would be the end. But I was strong, and hardy plants, which grow in outdoor soil, can bear bleak winds that blow from Arctic lands, whereof a single breath would lay the hothouse blossom low in death. The hours went by, too slow, and yet too fast. All day I argued with my foolish heart, that bade me play the shrinking coward's part, and hide from pain. And when the day had passed, and time for Vivian's call drew near and nearer, it pleaded, wait, until the way seems clearer, say you are ill, or busy, keep away, until you gather strength enough to play the part you have resolved on. Nay, not so, made answer clear-eyed reason, do you go, and put your resolution to the test. Resolve, however nobly formed, at best, is but a still-born babe of thought, until it proves existence of its life and will, by sound or action. So when Helen came, and knelt by me, her fair face all aflame, with sudden blushes, whispering, my sweet, my heart can hear the music of his feet, go down with me to meet him, I arose, and went with her all calmly, as one goes, to look upon the dear face of the dead. That eve, I know not what I did or said. I was not cold, my manner was not strange, perchance I talked more freely than my wont, but in my speech was naught could give affront, yet I conveyed, as only woman can, that nameless something, which bespeaks a change. It is in the power of woman, if she be whole-souled and noble, free from coquetry, her motives all unselfish, worthy, good, to make herself and feelings understood, by nameless acts, thus sparing what to man, however gently answered, causes pain, the offering of his hand and heart in vain. She can be friendly, unrestrained, and kind, assume no airs of pride or arrogance, but in her voice, her manner, and her glance, convey that mystic something, undefined, which men fail not to understand and read, and, when not blind with egoism, heed. My task was harder. It was the slow undoing of long sweet months of unimpeded wooing. It was to hide and cover and conceal the truth, assuming what I did not feel. It was to dam love's happy singing tide, that blessed me with its hopeful, tuneful tone, by feigned indifference, till it turned aside, and changed its channel, leaving me alone, to walk parched plains, and thirst for that sweet draught my lips had tasted, but another quaffed. It could be done. For no words yet were spoken, none to recall, no pledges to be broken. He will be grieved, then angry, cold, then cross, I reasoned, thinking what would be his part in this strange drama. Then, because he feels something lacking to make good his loss, he'll turn to Helen and her gentle grace, and loving acts will win her soon the place I hold today, and like a troubled dream, at length, our past, when he looks back, will seem. That evening passed with music, chat and song, but hours that once had flown on airy wings, now limped on weary, aching limbs along, each moment like some dreaded step that brings a twinge of pain. As Vivian rose to go, slow bending to me, from his greater height, he took my hand, and, looking in my eyes, with tender questioning and pained surprise, said, Maurine, you are not yourself tonight. What is it? Are you ailing? Ailing? No, I answered, laughing lightly, I am not. Just see my cheek, sir. Is it thin, or pale? Now tell me, am I looking very frail? Nay, nay, he answered, it cannot be seen. The change I speak of, it was more in your mien, preoccupation, or I know not what. Miss Helen, am I wrong, or does Maurine seem to have something on her mind this eve? She does, laughed Helen, and I do believe I know what it is. A letter came today, which she read slyly, and then hid away, close to her heart, not knowing I was near, and since she's been as you have seen her here. See how she blushes. So my random shot, we must believe, has struck a tender spot. Her rippling laughter floated through the room, and redder yet I felt the hot blood rise, then surge away to leave me pale as death, under the dark and swiftly gathering gloom of Vivian's questioning, accusing eyes, that searched my soul. I almost shrieked beneath that stern, fixed gaze, and stood spellbound until he turned with sudden movement, gave his hand to each in turn, and said, You must not stand longer, young ladies, in this open door. The air is heavy with a cold damp chill. We shall have rain tomorrow, or before. Good night. He vanished in the darkling shade, and so the dreaded evening found an end, that saw me grasp the conscience-whetted blade, and strike a blow for honor and for friend. How swiftly passed the evening! Helen sighed. How long the hours, my tortured heart replied. Joy, like a child, with lightsome steps doth glide by far the time, and, looking in his face, cries, snatching blossoms from the fair roadside, I could pluck more, but for thy hurried pace. The while her elder brother Pain, man grown, whose feet are hurt by many a thorn and stone, looks to some distant hilltop, high and calm, where he shall find not only rest, but balm, for all his wounds, and cries in tones of woe, O Father Time! Why is thy pace so slow? 2 days, all sad with lonely wind and rain, went sobbing by, repeating over and over, the miserere, desolate and drear, which every human heart must sometime hear. Pain is but little varied. Its refrain, whatever the words are, is for aye the same. The 3rd day brought a change, for with it came, not only sunny smiles to nature's face, but Roy, our Roy came back to us. Once more, we looked into his laughing, handsome eyes, which, while they gave Aunt Ruth a glad surprise, in no way puzzled her, for one glance told what each succeeding one confirmed, that he, who bent above her with the lissom grace of his fine form, though grown so tall, could be no other than the Roy Montaigne of old. It was a sweet reunion, and he brought so much of sunshine with him, that I caught, just from his smile alone, enough of gladness to make my heart forget a time its sadness. We talked together of the dear old days, leaving the present, with its depths and heights, of life's mature sorrows and delights. I turned back to my childhood's level land, and Roy and I, dear playmates, hand in hand, wandered in memory, through the olden ways. It was the 2nd evening of his coming. Helen was playing dreamily, and humming some wordless melody of white-souled thought, while Roy and I sat by the open door, reliving childish incidents of yore. My eyes were glowing, and my cheeks were hot, with warm young blood, excitement, joy, or pain, alike would send swift coursing through each vein. Roy, always eloquent, was waxing fine, and bringing vividly before my gaze some old adventure of those halcyon days, when suddenly in pauses of the talk, I heard a well-known step upon the walk, and looked up quickly to meet full in mine the eyes of Vivian Dangerfield. A flash shot from their depths, a sudden blaze of light, like that swift followed by the thunder's crash, which said, suspicion is confirmed by sight, as they fell on the pleasant doorway scene. Then over his clear-cut face, a cold white look crept, like the pallid moonlight over a brook, and, with a slight, proud bending of the head, he stepped toward us haughtily and said, Please pardon my intrusion, Miss Maurine. I called to ask Miss Trevor for a book. She spoke of lending me. Nay, sit you still. And I, by grant of your permission, will pass by to where I hear her playing. Stay, I said, one moment, Vivian, if you please, and suddenly bereft of all my ease, and scarcely knowing what to do, or say, confused as any schoolgirl, I arose, and some way made each to the other known. They bowed, shook hands, then Vivian turned away, and sought out Helen, leaving us alone. One of Miss Trevor's, or of Maurine's beaux. Which may he be, who cometh like a prince, with haughty bearing, and an eagle eye? Roy queried, laughing, and I answered, Since you saw him pass me for Miss Trevor's side, I leave your own good judgment to reply. And straightway caused the tide of talk to glide in other channels, striving to dispel the sudden gloom that over my spirit fell. We mortals are such hypocrites at best. When conscience tries our courage with a test, and points to some steep pathway, we set out, boldly, denying any fear or doubt, but pause before the first rock in the way, and, looking back, with tears, at conscience, say, We are so sad, dear conscience. For we would most gladly do what to thee seemeth good, but lo! This rock. We cannot climb it, so thou must point out some other way to go. Yet secretly we are rejoicing, and, when right before our faces, as we stand, in seeming grief, the rock is cleft in twain, leaving the pathway clear, we shrink in pain. And lo to go, by every act reveal, what we so tried from conscience to conceal. I saw that hour, the way made plain, to do, with scarce an effort, what had seemed a strife, that would require the strength of my whole life. Women have quick perceptions, and I knew that Vivian's heart was full of jealous pain. Suspecting, nay believing Roy Montaigne to be my lover. First my altered mien, and next the letter, then the doorway scene, my flushed face gazing in the one above, that bent so near me, and my strange confusion, when Vivian came, all led to one conclusion, that I had but been playing with his love, as women sometimes cruelly do play, with hearts when their true lovers are away. There could be nothing easier, than just, to let him linger on in this belief, till hour-fed suspicion and distrust, should turn to scorn and anger all his grief. Compared with me, so doubly sweet and pure, would Helen seem, my purpose would be sure, and certain of completion in the end. But now, the way was made so straight and clear, my coward heart shrank back in guilty fear, till conscience whispered with her still small voice, The precious time is passing, make thy choice, resign thy love, or slay thy trusting friend. The growing moon, watched by the myriad eyes of countless stars, went sailing through the skies, like some young prince, rising to rule a nation, to whom all eyes are turned in expectation. A woman who possesses tact and art, and strength of will can take the hand of doom, and walk on, smiling sweetly as she goes, with rosy lips, and rounded cheeks of bloom, cheating a loud-tongued world that never knows the pain and sorrow of her hidden heart. And so I joined in Roy's bright changing chat, answered his sallies, talked of this and that, my brow unruffled as the calm still wave, that tells not of the wrecked ship, and the grave, beneath its surface. Then we heard, ere long, the sound of Helen's gentle voice in song, and, rising, entered where the subtle power of Vivian's eyes, forgiving while accusing, finding me weak, had won me, in that hour. But Roy, always polite and debonair, where ladies were, now hung about my chair, with nameless delicate attentions, using that air devotional, and those small arts, acquaintance with society imparts, to men gallant by nature. It was my sex, and not myself he bowed to. Had my place been filled that evening by a dowager, twice his own age, he would have given her the same attentions. But they served to vex whatever hope in Vivian's heart remained. The cold, white look crept back upon his face, which told how deeply he was hurt and pained. Little by little all things had conspired to bring events I dreaded, yet desired. We were in constant intercourse, walks, rides, picnics and sails, filled weeks of golden weather, and almost hourly we were thrown together. No words were spoken of rebuke or scorn, good friends we seemed. But as a gulf divides this land and that, though lying side by side, so rolled a gulf between us, deep and wide, the gulf of doubt, which widened slowly morn, and noon and night. Free and informal were these picnics and excursions. Yet, although Helen and I would sometimes choose to go without our escorts, leaving them quite free, it happened always Roy would seek out me, ere passed the day, while Vivian walked with her. I had no thought of flirting. Roy was just like some dear brother, and I quite forgot the kinship was so distant it was not safe to rely upon in perfect trust, without reserve or caution. Many a time, when there was some steep mountain side to climb, and I grew weary, he would say, Maurine, come rest you here. And I would go and lean my head upon his shoulder, or would stand and let him hold in his my willing hand, the while he stroked it gently with his own. Or I would let him clasp me with his arm, nor entertained a thought of any harm, nor once supposed but Vivian was alone in his suspicions. But ere long the truth I learned in consternation. Both Aunt Ruth and Helen honestly, in faith believed that Roy and I were lovers. Undeceived, some careless words might open Vivian's eyes and spoil my plans. So reasoning in this wise, to all their sallies I in jest replied, to naught assented, and yet naught denied, with Roy unchanged remaining, confident, each understood just what the other meant. If I grew weary of this double part, and self-imposed deception caused my heart sometimes to shrink, I needed but to gaze on Helen's face, that wore a look ethereal, as if she dwelt above the things material, and held communion with the angels. So, I fed my strength and courage through the days. What time the harvest moon rose full and clear, and cast its lingering radiance on the earth, we made a feast, and called from far and near our friends, who came to share the scene of mirth. Fair forms and faces flitted to and from, but none more sweet than Helen's. Robed in white, she floated like a vision through the dance. So frailly fragile and so phantom fair, she seemed like some stray spirit of the air, and was pursued by many an anxious glance, that looked to see her fading from the sight, like figures that a dreamer sees at night. And noble men and gallants graced the scene, yet none more noble or more grand of mien, than Vivian, broad of chest and shoulder, tall, and finely formed, as any Grecian god, whose high-arched foot on Mount Olympus trod. His clear-cut face was beardless, and, like those same Grecian statues, when in calm repose, was it in hue and feature. Framed in hair, dark and abundant, lighted by large eyes, that could be cold as steel in winter air, or warm and sunny as Italian skies. Weary of mirth and music, and the sound of tripping feet, I sought a moment's rest within the library, where a group I found of guests, discussing with apparent zest some theme of interest, Vivian, near the while, leaning and listening with his slow odd smile. "Now, Miss La Pelle, we will appeal to you," cried young Guy Semple, as I entered. "We have been discussing right before his face, all unrebuked by him, as you may see, a poem lately published by our friend, and we are quite divided. I contend, the poem is a libel and untrue. I hold the fickle women are but few, compared with those who are like yon fair moon, that, ever faithful, rises in her place, whether she's greeted by the flowers of June, or cold and dreary stretches of white space." "Oh," cried another, "Mr. Dangerfield, look to your laurels, or you needs must yield the crown to Semple, who, it is very plain, has mounted Pegasus and grasped his manner." All laughed, and then, as Guy appealed to me, I answered lightly, "My young friend, I fear you chose a most unlucky simile to prove the truth of woman. To her place, the moon does rise, but with a different face, each time she comes. But now I needs must hear the poem read, before I can consent to pass my judgment on the sentiment." All clamored that the author was the man to read the poem, and, with tones that said more than the cutting, scornful words he read, taking the book Guy gave him, he began, "Her love. The sands upon the ocean side, that change about with every tide, and never true to one abide, a woman's love I liken to. The summer zephyrs, light and vain, that sing the same alluring strain, to every grass blade on the plain, a woman's love is nothing more. The sunshine of an April day, that comes to warm you with its ray, but while you smile has flown away, a woman's love is like to this. God made poor woman with no heart, but gave her skill, and tact, and art, and so she lives, and plays her part. We must not blame, but pity her. She leans to man, but just to hear the praise he whispers in her ear, herself, not him, she holdeth dear, O fool! To be deceived by her. To sate her selfish thirst she quaffs the love of strong hearts in sweet draughts, then throws them lightly by and laughs, too weak to understand their pain. As changeful as the winds that blow from every region, to and from, devoid of heart, she cannot know the suffering of a human heart." I knew the cold, fixed gaze of Vivian's eyes, saw the slow color to my forehead rise, but lightly answered, toying with my fan, "That sentiment is very like a man. Men call us fickle, but they do us wrong. Where only frail and helpless men are strong, And when love dies, they take the poor dead thing, and make a shroud out of their suffering, and drag the corpse about with them for years. But we mourn it for a day with tears. And then we robe it for its last long rest, and being women, feeble things at best, we cannot dig the grave ourselves. And so, we call strong-limbed new love to lay it low, immortal sexton he, whom Venus sends, to do this service for her earthly friends. The trusty fellow digs the grave so deep, nothing disturbs the dead laid there to sleep. The laugh that followed had not died away, ere Roy Montaigne came seeking me, to say, the band was tuning for our waltz, and so, back to the ballroom bore me. In the glow, and heat and whirl, my strength ere long was spent, and I grew faint and dizzy, and we went out on the cool moonlighted portico. And, sitting there, Roy drew my languid head upon the shelter of his breast, and bent his smiling eyes upon me, as he said, I'll try the mesmerism of my touch, to work a cure. Be very quiet now, and let me make some passes over your brow. Why, how it throbs! You've exercised too much. I shall not let you dance again tonight. Just then before us, in the broad moonlight, two forms were mirrored, and I turned my face, to catch the teasing and mischievous glance of Helen's eyes, as, heated by the dance, leaning on Vivian's arm, she sought this place. I beg your pardon, came in that round tone of his low voice. I think we do intrude. Bowing, they turned, and left us quite alone, ere I could speak or change my attitude. Part 5. A visit to a cave some miles away was next in order. So, one sunny day, 4 prancing steeds conveyed a laughing load of merry pleasure seekers over the road. A basket picnic, music and croquet were in the program. Skies were blue and clear, and cool winds whispered of the autumn near. The merrymakers filled the time with pleasure, some floated to the music's rhythmic measure, some played, some promenaded on the green. Ticked off by happy hearts, the moments passed. The afternoon, all glow and glimmer, came. Helen and Roy were leaders of some game, and Vivian was not visible. Maurine, I challenge you to climb yon cliff with me. And who shall tire, or reach the summit last, must pay a forfeit, cried a romping maid. Come. Start at once, or own you are afraid. So challenged I made ready for the race, deciding first the forfeit was to be a handsome pair of booties to replace the victor's loss who made the rough ascent. The cliff was steep and stony. On we went, as eagerly as if the path was fame, and what we climbed for, glory and a name. My hands were bruised, my garments sadly rent, but on I clambered. Soon I heard a cry, Maurine! Maurine! My strength is wholly spent. You've won the boots. I'm going back, goodbye. And back she turned, in spite of laugh and jeer. I reached the summit, and its solitude, wherein no living creature did intrude, save some sad birds that wheeled and circled near, I found far sweeter than the scene below. Alone with one who knew my hidden woe, I did not feel so much alone as when I mixed with the unthinking throngs of men. Some flowers that decked the barren, sterile place, I plucked, and read the lesson they conveyed, that in our lives, albeit dark with shade, and rough and hard with labor, yet may grow the flowers of patience, sympathy, and grace. As I walked on in meditative thought, a serpent writhed across my pathway, not a large or deadly serpent, yet the sight filled me with ghastly terror and affright. I shrieked aloud, a darkness veiled my eyes, and I fell fainting 'neath the watchful skies. I was no coward. Country-bred and born, I had no feeling but the keenest scorn for those fine lady R's and O's of fear, so much assumed when any man is near. But God implanted in each human heart a natural horror and a sickly dread of that accursed, slimy, creeping thing that squirms a limbless carcass over the ground. And where that inborn loathing is not found, you'll find the serpent qualities instead. Who fears it not, himself is next of kin, and in his bosom holds some treacherous art, whereby to counteract its venomed sting. And all are sired by Satan, chief of sin. Who loathes not that foul creature of the dust, however fair in seeming, I distrust. I woke from my unconsciousness, to know, I leaned upon a broad and manly breast, and Vivian's voice was speaking, soft and low, sweet whispered words of passion, over and over. I dared not breathe. Had I found Eden's shore? Was this a foretaste of eternal bliss? My love, he sighed, his voice like winds that moan before a rain in summertime, my own, for one sweet stolen moment, lie and rest upon this heart that loves and hates you both. O fair false face! Why were you made so fair? O mouth of southern sweetness! That ripe kiss, that hangs upon you, I do take an oath, his lips shall never gather. There. And there. I steal it from him. Are you his, all his? Nay, you are mine, this moment, as I dreamed, blind fool, believing you were what you seemed, you would be mine in all the years to come. Fair fiend! I love and hate you in a breath. O God! If this white pallor were but death, and I were stretched beside you, cold and dumb, my arms about you, so, in fond embrace. My lips pressed, so, upon your dying face. Woman, how dare you bring me to such shame? How dare you drive me to an act like this, to steal from your unconscious lips the kiss you lured me on to think my rightful claim? O frail and puny woman! Could you know, the devil that you waken in the hearts, you snare and bind in your enticing arts, the thin, pale stuff that in your veins doth flow, would freeze in terror. Strange you have such power, to please, or pain us, poor, weak, soulless things, devoid of passion as a senseless flower. Like butterflies, your only boast, your wings. There, now, I scorn you from this hour, and hate myself for having talked of love. He pushed me from him. And I felt as those doomed angels must, when pearly gates above are closed against them. With a feigned surprise, I started up and opened wide my eyes, and looked about. Then in confusion rose, and stood before him. Pardon me, I pray. He said quite coldly. Half an hour ago, I left you with the company below, and sought this cliff. A moment since you cried, it seemed, in sudden terror and alarm. I came in time to see you swoon away. You'll need assistance down the rugged side of this steep cliff. I pray you take my arm. So, formal and constrained, we passed along, rejoined our friends, and mingled with the throng, to have no further speech again that day. Next morn there came a bulky document, the legal firm of blank and blank had sent, containing news and looked for an estate, which proved a cosy fortune, no wise great, or princely, had in France been left to me, my grandsire's last descendant. And it brought a sense of joy and freedom in the thought of foreign travel, which I hoped would be a panacea for my troubled mind, that longed to leave the olden scenes behind, with all their recollections, and to flee to some strange country. I was in such haste to put between me and my native land the briny ocean's desolating waste. I gave Aunt Ruth no peace until she planned to sail that week, 2 months, though she was fain to wait until the springtime. Roy Montaigne would be our guide and escort. No one dreamed the cause of my strange hurry, but all seemed to think good fortune had quite turned my brain. One bright October morning, when the woods had donned their purple mantles and red hoods, in honor of the Frost King, Vivian came, bringing some green leaves, tipped with crimson flame, first trophies of the autumn time. And Roy made a proposal that we all should go and ramble in the forest for a while. But Helen said she was not well, and so must stay at home. Then Vivian, with a smile, responded, I will stay and talk to you, and they may go, at which her 2 cheeks grew like twin blush roses, dyed with love's red wave. Her fair face shone transfigured with great joy. And Vivian saw, and suddenly was grave. Roy took my arm in that protecting way, peculiar to some men, which seems to say, I shield my own, a manner pleasing, even when we are conscious that it does not mean more than a simple courtesy. A woman, whose heart is wholly feminine and human, and not unsexed by hobbies, likes to be the object of that tender chivalry, that guardianship which man bestows on her, yet mixed with deference, as if she were half child, half angel. Though she may be strong, noble and self-reliant, not afraid to raise her hand and voice against all wrong, and all oppression, yet if she be made, with all the independence of her thought, a woman womanly, as God designed, albeit she may have as great a mind, as man, her brother, yet his strength of arm, his muscle and his boldness she has not, and cannot have without she loses what is far more precious, modesty and grace. So, walking on in her appointed place, she does not strive to ape him, nor pretend, but that she needs him for a guide and friend, to shield her with his greater strength from harm. We reached the forest, wandered to and from, through many a winding path and dim retreat, till I grew weary, when I chose a seat, upon an oak tree, which had been laid low, by some wind storm, or by some lightning stroke. And Roy stood just below me, where the ledge, on which I sat sloped steeply to the edge, of sunny meadows lying at my feet. One hand held mine, the other grasped a limb, that cast its checkered shadows over him. And, with his head thrown back, his dark eyes raised, and fixed upon me, silently he gazed, until I, smiling, turned to him and spoke, "Give words, my cousin, to those thoughts that rise, and, like dumb spirits, look forth from your eyes." The smooth and even darkness of his cheek was stained one moment by a flush of red. He swayed his lithe form nearer as he stood, still clinging to the branch above his head. His brilliant eyes grew darker, and he said, with sudden passion, "Do you bid me speak? I cannot, then, keep silence if I would. That hateful fortune, coming as it did, forbade my speaking sooner, for I knew a harsh-tongued world would quickly misconstrue my motive for a meaner one. But, sweet, so big my heart has grown with love for you, I cannot shelter it, or keep it hid. And so I cast it throbbing at your feet, for you to guard and cherish, or to break. Maurine, I love you better than my life. My friend, my cousin, be still more, my wife." Maurine, Maurine, what answer do you make? I scarce could breathe for wonderment, and numb, with truth that fell too suddenly, sat dumb, with sheer amaze, and stared at Roy with eyes that looked no feeling but complete surprise. He swayed so near his breath was on my cheek. "Maurine, Maurine," he whispered, "will you speak?" Then suddenly, as over some magic glass, one picture in a score of shapes will pass, I seemed to see Roy glide before my gaze. First, as the playmate of my earlier days, next, as my kin, and then my valued friend, and last, my lover. As when colors blend, in some unlooked-for group before our eyes, we hold the glass, and look them over and over, so now I gazed on Roy in his new guise, in which he never appeared to me before. His form was like a panther's in its grace, so lithe and supple, and of medium height, and garbed in all the elegance of fashion. His large black eyes were full of fire and passion, and in expression fearless, firm, and bright. His hair was like the very deeps of night, and hung in raven clusters around a face of dark and flashing beauty. He was more like some romantic maiden's grand ideal than like a common being. As I gazed upon the handsome face to mine upraised, I saw before me, living, breathing, real, the hero of my early daydreams, though so full my heart was with that clear-cut face, which, all unlike, yet claimed the hero's place. I had not recognized him so before, or thought of him, save as a valued friend. So now I called him, adding, "Foolish boy! Each word of love you utter aims a blow at that sweet trust one had reposed in you. I was so certain I had found a true, steadfast man-friend, on whom I could depend, and go on wholly trusting, to the end. Why did you shatter my delusion, Roy, by turning to a lover? Why, indeed? Because I loved you more than any brother, or any friend could love." Then he began to argue like a lawyer, and to plead with all his eloquence. And, listening, I strove to think it was a goodly thing to be so fondly loved by such a man, and it was best to give his wooing heed, and not deny him. Then before my eyes, in all its clear-cut majesty, that other, haughty and poet-handsome face would rise, and rob my purpose of all life and strength. Roy urged and argued, as Roy only could, with that impetuous, boyish eloquence. He held my hands, and vowed I must, and should, give some least hope, till, in my own defense, I turned upon him, and replied at length, "I thank you for the noble heart you offer, but it deserves a true one in exchange. I could love you if I loved not another, who keeps my heart, so I have none to proffer." Then, seeing how his dark eyes flashed, I said, "Dear Roy, I know my words seem very strange, but I love one I cannot hope to Wednesday. A river rolls between us, dark and deep. To cross it were to stain with blood my hand. You force my speech on what I fain would keep, in my own bosom, but you understand? My heart is given to love that's sanctified, and now can feel no other. Be you kind, dear Roy, my brother. Speak of this no more, lest pleading and denying should divide the hearts so long united. Let me find in you my cousin and my friend of yore, and now come home. The morning, all too soon, and unperceived, has melted into noon. Helen will miss us, and we must return. He took my hand, and helped me to arise, smiling upon me with his sad dark eyes. Where passion's fires had, sudden, ceased to burn. And so, he said, too soon and unforeseen, my friendship melted into love, Maurine. But, sweet, I am not wholly in the blame, for what you term my folly. You forgot, so long we'd known each other, I had not, in truth, a brother's or a cousin's claim. But I remembered, when through every nerve, your lightest touch went thrilling, and began to love you with that human love of man, for comely woman. By your coaxing arts, you won your way into my heart of hearts, and all platonic feelings put to rout. A maid should never lay aside reserve, with one who's not her kinsman, out and out. But as we now, with measured steps, retrace the path we came, even so my heart I'll send, at your command, back to the olden place, and strive to love you only as a friend. I felt the justice of his mild reproof, but answered laughing, it is the same old cry, the woman tempted me, and I did eat. Since Adam's time we've heard it. But I'll try, and be more prudent, sir, and hold aloof. The fruit I never once had thought so sweet, it would tempt you any. Now go dress for dinner, thou sinned against. As also will the sinner. And guard each act, that no least look betray what's passed between us. Then I turned away, and sought my room, low humming some old air, that ceased upon the threshold, for mine eyes fell on a face so glorified and fair, all other senses, merged in that of sight, were lost in contemplation of the bright and wondrous picture, which had otherwise made dim my vision. Waiting in my room, her whole face lit as by an inward flame, that shed its halo around her, Helen stood, her fair hands folded like a lily's leaves, weighed down by happy dews of summer eves. Upon her cheek the color went and came, as sunlight flickers over a bed of bloom, and, like some slim young sapling of the wood, her slender form leaned slightly, and her hair fell around her loosely, in long curling strands, all unconfined, and as by loving hands, tossed into bright confusion. Standing there, her starry eyes uplifted, she did seem like some unearthly creature of a dream, until she started forward, gliding slowly, and broke the breathless silence, speaking lowly, as one grown meek and humble in an hour, bowing before some new and mighty power. Maurine, Maurine, she murmured, and again, Maurine, my own sweet friend, Maurine. And then, laying her love-light hands upon my head, she leaned, and looked into my eyes, and said, with voice that bore her joy in every tone, as winds that blow across a garden bed, are weighed with fragrance, he is mine alone, and I am his, all his very own. So pledged this hour, by that most sacred tie, save one beneath God's overarching sky. I could not wait to tell you of my bliss, I want your blessing, sweetheart. And your kiss. So hiding my heart's trouble with a smile, I leaned and kissed her dainty mouth, the while I felt a guilt joy, as of some sweet sin, when my lips fell where his so late had been. And all day long I bore about with me a sense of shame, yet mixed with satisfaction, as some starved child might steal a loaf, and be sad with the guilt resulting from her action, while yet the morsel in her mouth was sweet. That evening when the house had settled down to sleep and quiet, to my room there crept a lithe young form, robed in a long white gown, with steps like fall of thistledown she came, her mouth smile wreathed, and, breathing low my name, nestled in graceful beauty at my feet. Sweetheart, she murmured softly, ere I sleep, I needs must tell you all my tale of joy. Beginning where you left us, you and Roy. You saw the color flame upon my cheek, when Vivian spoke of staying. So did he, and, when we were alone, he gazed at me, with such a strange look in his wondrous eyes. The silence deepened, and I tried to speak upon some common topic, but could not, my heart was in such tumult. In this wise, 5 happy moments glided by us, fraught with hours of feeling. Vivian rose up then, and came and stood by me and stroked my hair. And, in his low voice, over and over again, said, "Helen, little Helen, frail and fair." Then took my face, and turned it to the light, and looking in my eyes, and seeing what was shining from them, murmured, sweet and low, "Dear eyes, you cannot veil the truth from sight. You love me, Helen. Answer, is it so?" And I made answer straightway, "With my life and soul and strength I love you, O my love." He leaned and took me gently to his breast, and said, "Here then this dainty head shall rest, henceforth forever, O my little dove. My lilybud, my fragile blossom wife." And then I told him all my thoughts, and he listened, with kisses for his comments, till my tale was finished. Then he said, "I will be frank with you, my darling, from the start, and hide no secret from you in my heart. I love you, Helen, but you are not first to rouse that love to being. Ere we met, I loved a woman madly, never dreaming she was not all in truth she was in seeming. Enough. She proved to be that thing accursed, of God and man, a wily vain coquette. I hate myself for having loved her. Yet, so much my heart spent on her, it must give a love less ardent and less prodigal, albeit just as tender and as true, a milder, yet a faithful love to you. Just as some evil fortune might befall a man's great riches, causing him to live in some low cot, all unpretending, still as much his home, as much his loved retreat, as was the princely palace on the hill, even so I give you all that's left, my sweet. Of my heart fortune. That were more to me, I made swift smiling answer, than to be the worshipped consort of a king. And so, our faith was pledged. But Vivian would not go, until I vowed to wed him New Year Day. And I am sad because you go away, before that time. I shall not feel half wed, without you here. Postpone your trip and stay, and be my bridesmaid. Nay, I cannot, dear. It would disarrange our plans for half a year. I'll be in Europe New Year Day, I said, and send congratulations by the cable. And from my soul thanked Providence for sparing the pain, to me, of sharing in, and wearing, the festal garments of a wedding scene, while all my heart was hung with sorrow sable. Forgetting for a season, that between the cup and lip lies many a chance of loss, I lived in my near future, confident all would be as I planned it, and, across the briny waste of waters, I should find some balm and comfort for my troubled mind. The sad fall days, like maidens auburn tressed, and amber-eyed, in purple garments dressed, passed by, and dropped their tears upon the tomb of fair Queen Summer, buried in her bloom. Roy left us for a time, and Helen went to make the nuptial preparations. Then, Aunt Ruth complained one day of feeling ill. Her veins ran red with fever, and the skill of 2 physicians could not stem the tide. The house, that rang so late with laugh and jest, grew ghostly with low whispered sounds, and when the autumn day, that I had thought to be bounding upon the billows of the sea, came sobbing in, it found me pale and worn, striving to keep away that unloved guest, who comes unbidden, making hearts to mourn. Through all the anxious weeks I watched beside the sufferer's couch. Roy was my help and stay. Others were kind, but he alone each day brought strength and comfort by his cheerful face and hopeful words that fell in that sad place, like rays of light upon a darkened way. November passed, and winter, crisp and chill, in robes of ermine walked on plain and hill. Returning light and life dispelled the gloom that cheated death had brought us from the tomb. Aunt Ruth was saved, and slowly getting better, was dressed each day, and walked about the room. Then came one morning in the Eastern mail, a little white-winged birdling of a letter. I broke the seal and read, "Maurine, my own. I hear Aunt Ruth is better, and am glad. I felt so sorry for you, and so sad, to think I left you when I did, alone, to bear your pain and worry, and those nights of weary, anxious watching. Vivian writes, your plans are changed now, and you will not sail before the springtime. So you'll come and be my bridesmaid, darling. Do not say me nay. But 3 weeks more of girlhood left to me. Come, if you can, just 2 weeks from today, and make your preparations here. My sweet. Indeed I am not glad Aunt Ruth was ill, I'm sorry she has suffered so, and still, I'm thankful something happened, so you stayed. I'm sure my wedding would be incomplete without your presence. Selfish, I'm afraid, you'll think you're Helen. But I love you so, how can I be quite willing you should go? Come Christmas Eve, or earlier. Let me know, and I will meet you, dearie. At the train. Your happy, loving Helen. Then the pain, that, hidden under later pain and care, had made no moan, but silent, seemed to sleep, woke from its trance-like lethargy, to steep my tortured heart in anguish and despair. I had relied too fully on my skill, in bending circumstances to my will, and now I was rebuked and made to see, that God alone knoweth what is to be. Then came a messenger from Vivian, who came not himself, as he was wont to do, but sent his servant each new day to bring a kindly message, or an offering, of juicy fruits to cool the lips of fever, or dainty hothouse blossoms, with their bloom, to brighten up the convalescent's room. But now the servant only brought a line, from Vivian Dangerfield to Roy Montaigne, dear sir, and friend, in letters bold and plain, written on cream-white paper, so it ran, it is the will and pleasure of Miss Trevor, and therefore doubly so a wish of mine, that you shall honour me next New Year Eve, my wedding hour, by standing as best man. Miss Trevor has 6 bridesmaids I believe. Being myself a novice in the art, if I should fail in acting well my part, I'll need protection against the regiment of outraged ladies. So, I pray, consent to stand by me in time of need, and shield your friend sincerely, Vivian Dangerfield. The last least hope had vanished, I must drain, even to the dregs, this bitter cup of pain. Part 6. There was a week of bustle and of hurry, a stately home echoed to voices sweet, calling, replying, and to tripping feet, of busy bridesmaids, running to and from, with all that girlish fluttering and flurry, preceding such occasions. Helen's room was like a lily garden, all in bloom, decked with the dainty robes of her trousseau. My robe was fashioned by swift, skillful hands, a thing of beauty, elegant and rich, a mystery of looping, puffs and bands, and as I watched it growing, stitch by stitch, I felt as one might feel who should behold, with vision trance-like, where his body lay, in deathly slumber, simulating clay, his grave cloth sewed together, fold on fold. I lived with every nerve upon the strain, as men go into battle, and the pain, that, more and more, to my sad heart revealed, grew ghastly with its horrors, was concealed from mortal eyes by superhuman power, that God bestowed upon me, hour by hour. What night the old year gave unto the new, the key of human happiness and woe, the pointed stars, upon their field of blue, shone, white and perfect, over a world below, of snow-clad beauty, all the trees were dressed in gleaming garments, decked with diadems, each seeming like a bridal-bidden guest, coming overladen with a gift of gems. The bustle of the dressing-room, the sound of eager voices in discourse, the clang of sweet bells jangled, thud of steel-clad feet, that beat swift music on the frozen ground, all blend together in my brain, and rang, a medley of strange noises, incomplete, and full of discords. Then out on the night, streamed from this open vestibule, a light, that lit the velvet blossoms which we trod, with all the hues of those that decked the sod. The grand cathedral windows were ablaze, with gorgeous colors, through a sea of bloom, up the long aisle, to join the waiting groom, the bridal cortege passed. As some lost soul might surge on with the curious crowd, to gaze upon its coffin body, so I went, with that glad festal throng. The organ sent great waves of melody along the air, that broke and fell, in liquid drops, like spray, on happy hearts that listened. But to me, it sounded faintly, as if miles away, a troubled spirit, sitting in despair, beside the sad and ever-moaning sea, gave utterance to sighing sounds of dole. We paused before the altar. Framed in flowers, the white-robed man of God stood forth. I heard the solemn service open, through long hours. I seemed to stand and listen, while each word fell on my ear as falls the sound of clay upon the coffin of the worshipped dead. The stately father gave the bride away, the bridegroom circled with a golden band, the taper finger of her dainty hand. The last imposing, binding words were said, "What God has joined let no man put asunder," and all my strife with self was at an end, my lover was the husband of my friend. How strangely, in some awful hour of pain, external trifles with our sorrows blend. I never hear the mighty organ's thunder, I never catch the scent of heliotrope, nor see stained windows all ablaze with light, without that dizzy whirling of the brain, and all the ghastly feeling of that night, when my sick heart relinquished love and hope. The pain we feel so keenly may depart, and even its memory cease to haunt the heart, but some slight thing, a perfume, or a sound, will probe the closed recesses of the wound, and for a moment bring the old time smart. Congratulations, kisses, tears and smiles, goodbyes and farewells given, then across the snowy waste of weary wintry miles, back to my girlhood's home, where, through each room, forevermore pale phantoms of delight should aimless wander, always in my sight, pointing, with ghostly fingers, to the tomb, wet with the tears of living pain and loss. The sleepless nights of watching and of care, followed by that 1 week of keenest pain, taxing my weakened system and my brain, brought on a lingering illness. Day by day, in that strange, apathetic state I lay, of mental and of physical despair. I had no pain, no fever, and no chill, but lay without ambition, strength, or will, knowing no wish for anything but rest, which seemed, of all God's store of gifts, the best. Physicians came and shook their heads and sighed, and to their score of questions I replied, with but one languid answer, over and over. I am so weary, weary, nothing more. I slept, and dreamed I was some feathered thing, flying through space with ever-aching wing, seeking a ship called Rest all snowy white, that sailed and sailed before me, just in sight, but always one unchanging distance kept, and woke more weary than before I slept. I slept, and dreamed I ran to win a prize. A hand from heaven held down before my eyes. All eagerness I sought it, it was gone, but shone in all its beauty farther on. I ran, and ran, and ran, in eager quest, of that great prize, whereon was written, Rest, which ever just beyond my reach did gleam, and wakened doubly weary with my dream. I dreamed I was a crystal drop of rain, that saw a snow-white lily on the plain, and left the cloud to nestle in her breast. I fell and fell, but never more found rest, I fell and fell, but found no stopping place, through leagues and leagues of never-ending space, while space illimitable stretched before. And all these dreams but wearied me the more. Familiar voices sounded in my room, Aunt Ruth's and Roy's, and Helen's, but they seemed a part of some strange fancy I had dreamed, and now remembered dimly. Wrapped in gloom, my mind, overtaxed, lost hold of time at last, ignored its future, and forgot its past, and groped along the present, as a light, carried, uncovered, through the fogs of night, will flicker faintly. But I felt, at length, when March winds brought vague rumors of the spring, a certain sense of restlessness with rest. My aching frame was weary of repose, and wanted action. Then slow creeping strength came back with memory, hand in hand, to bring, and lay upon my sore and bleeding breast, grim-visaged recollection's thorny rose. I gained, and failed. One day could ride and walk, the next would find me prostrate, while a flock of ghostly thoughts, like phantom birds, would flit about the chambers of my heart, or sit, pale spectres of the past, with folded wings, perched, silently, upon the voiceless strings, that once resounded to hope's happy lays. So passed the ever-changing April days. When May came, lightsome-footed, over the lea, accompanied by kind Aunt Ruth and Roy, I bade farewell to home with secret joy, and turned my wan face eastward to the sea. Roy planned our route of travel, for all lands were one to him. Or Egypt's burning sands, or Alps of Switzerland, or stately Rome, all were familiar as the fields of home. There was a year of wandering to and from, like restless spirits, scaling mountain heights, dwelling among the countless, rare delights, of lands historic, turning dusty pages, stamped with the tragedies of mighty ages, gazing upon the scenes of bloody acts, of kings long buried, bare, unvarnished facts, surpassing wildest fictions of the brain, rubbing against all people, high and low, and by this contact feeling self to grow, smaller and less important, and the vein of human kindness deeper, seeing God, unto the humble delver of the sod, and to the ruling monarch on the throne, has given hope, ambition, joy, and pain, and that all hearts have feelings like our own. There is no school that disciplines the mind, and broadens thought, like contact with mankind. The college prison greybeard, who has burned the midnight lamp, and book-bound knowledge learned, till sciences or classics hold no law, he has not conned and studied, over and over. is but a babe in wisdom, when compared with some unlettered wanderer, who has shared the hospitalities of every land, felt touch of brother in each proffered hand, made man his study, and the world his college, and gained this grand epitome of knowledge: each human being has a heart and soul, and self is but an atom of the whole. I hold he is best learned and most wise, who best and most can love and sympathize. Book wisdom makes us vain and self-contained, our banded minds go round in little grooves, but constant friction with the world removes these iron foes to freedom, and we rise to grander heights, and, all untrammeled, find a better atmosphere and clearer skies, and through its broadened realm, no longer chained, thought travels freely, leaving self behind. Wherever we chanced to wander or to roam, glad letters came from Helen, happy things, like little birds that followed on swift wings, bringing their tender messages from home. Her days were poems, beautiful, complete, the rhythm perfect, and the burden sweet. She was so happy, and so blessed. My heart had found contentment in that year. With health restored, my life seemed full of cheer. The heart of youth turns ever to the light, sorrow and gloom may curtain it like night. But, in its very anguish and unrest, it beats and tears the pall-like folds away, and finds again the sunlight of the day. And yet, despite the changes without measure, despite sightseeing, round on round of pleasure, despite new friends, new suitors, still my heart was conscious of a something lacking, where love once had dwelt, and afterward despair. Now love was buried, and despair had flown, before the healthful zephyrs that had blown from heights serene and lofty, and the place where both had dwelt was empty, voiceless space. And so I took my long-loved study, art, the dreary vacuum in my life to fill, and worked, and labored, with a right good will. Aunt Ruth and I took rooms in Rome, while Roy lingered in Scotland, with his new-found joy. A dainty little lassie, Grace Kildare, had snared him in her flossy, flaxen hair, and made him captive. We were thrown, by chance, in contact with her people while in France. The previous season, she was wholly sweet, and fair and gentle, so naive, and yet so womanly. She was at once the pet of all our party, and, ere many days, won by her fresh face, and her artless ways, Roy fell a helpless captive at her feet. Her home was in the Highlands, and she came of good old stock, of fair untarnished fame. Through all these months Roy had been true as steel, and by his every action made me feel he was my friend and brother, and no more. The same big-souled and trusty friend of yore. Yet, in my secret heart, I wished I knew whether the love he felt one time was dead, or only hidden, for my sake, from view. So when he came to me one day, and said, the velvet blackness of his eyes ashine with light of love and triumph, cousin mine, congratulate me. She whom I adore has pledged to me the promise of her hand, her heart I have already. I was glad, with double gladness, for it freed my mind of fear that he, in secret, might be sad. From March till June had left her moons behind, and merged her rose-red beauty in July. There was no message from my native land. Then came a few brief lines, by Vivian penned. Death had been near to Helen, but passed by. The danger was now over. God was kind. The mother and the child were both alive. No other child was ever known to thrive as throve this one, nurse had been heard to say. The infant was a wonder, every way. And, at command of Helen he would send a lock of baby's golden hair to me. And did I, on my honor, ever see such hair before? Helen would write, ere long. She gained quite slowly, but would soon be strong, stronger than ever, so the doctors said. I took the tiny ringlet, golden, fair, mayhap his hand had severed from the head of his own child, and pressed it to my cheek, and to my lips, and kissed it over and over. All my maternal instincts seemed to rise, and clamor for their rights, while my wet eyes rained tears upon the silken tress of hair. The woman struggled with her heart before. It was the mother in me now did speak, moaning, like Rachel, that her babes were not, and crying out against her barren lot. Once I bemoaned the long and lonely years that stretched before me, dark with love's eclipse, and thought how my unmated heart would miss the shelter of a broad and manly breast, the strong, bold arm, the tender clinging kiss, and all pure love's possessions, manifold. But now I wept a flood of bitter tears, thinking of little heads of shining gold that would not on my bosom sink to rest, of little hands that would not touch my cheek, of little lisping voices, and sweet lips, that never in my listening ear would speak, the blessed name of mother. Oh, in woman, how mighty is the love of offspring! Ere, unto her wondering, untaught mind unfolds, the mystery that is half divine, half human, of life and birth, the love of unborn souls, within her, and the mother yearning creeps, through her warm heart, and stirs its hidden deeps, and grows and strengthens with each riper year. As storms may gather in a placid sky, and spend their fury, and then pass away, leaving again the blue of cloudless day, even so the tempest of my grief passed by. It was weak to mourn for what I had resigned, with the deliberate purpose of my mind, to my sweet friend. Relinquishing my love, I gave my dearest hope of joy to her. If God, from out his boundless store above, had chosen added blessings to confer, I would rejoice, for her sake, not repine, that the immortal treasures were not mine. Better my lonely sorrow, than to know, my selfish joy had been another's woe, better my grief and my strength to control, than the despair of her frail-bodied soul, better to go on, loveless, to the end, than wear love's rose, whose thorn had slain my friend. Work is the salve that heals the wounded heart. With will most resolute I set my aim, to enter on the weary race for fame, and if I failed to climb the dizzy height, to reach some point of excellence in art. Even as the Maker held earth incomplete, till man was formed, and placed upon the sod, the perfect, living image of his God, all landscape scenes were lacking in my sight, wherein the human figure had no part. In that, all lines of symmetry did meet, all hues of beauty mingle. So I brought enthusiasm in abundance, thought, much study, and some talent, day by day, to help me in my efforts to portray the wondrous power, majesty, and grace, stamped on some form, or looking from some face. This was to be my specialty, to take human emotion for my theme, and make the unassisted form divine express anger or sorrow, pleasure, pain, distress, and thus to build fame's monument above the grave of my departed hope and love. This is not genius. Genius spreads its wings, and soars beyond itself, or selfish things. Talent has need of stepping stones, some cross, some cheated purpose, some great pain or loss, must lay the groundwork, and arouse ambition, before it labors onward to fruition. But, as the lark from beds of bloom will rise, and sail and sing among the very skies, still mounting near and nearer to the light, impelled alone by love of upward flight, so genius soars, it does not need to climb upon God-given wings, to heights sublime. Some sportsman's shot, grazing the singer's throat, some venomous assault of birds of prey, may speed its flight toward the realm of day, and tinge with triumph every liquid note. So deathless genius mounts but higher yet, when strife and envy think to slay or fret. There is no balking genius. Only death can silence it or hinder. While there's breath, or sense of feeling, it will spurn the sod, and lift itself to glory, and to God. The acorn sprouted, weeds nor flowers can choke the certain growth of the upreaching oak. Talent was mine, not genius, and my mind seemed bound by chains, and would not leave behind its selfish love and sorrow. Did I strive to picture some emotion, lo! His eyes, of emerald beauty, dark as ocean dyes, looked from the canvas, and my buried pain rose from its grave, and stood by me alive. Whatever my subject, in some hue or line, the glorious beauty of his face would shine. So for a time my labor seemed in vain, since it but freshened, and made keener yet, the grief my heart was striving to forget. While in his form all strength and magnitude, with grace and supple sinews were entwined, while in his face all beauties were combined, of perfect features, intellect and truth, with all that fine rich coloring of youth, how could my brush portray aught good or fair, wherein no fatal likeness should intrude, of him my soul had worshipped? But, at last, setting a watch upon my unwise heart, that thus would mix its sorrow with my art, I resolutely shut away the past, and made the toilsome present passing bright, with dreams of what was hidden from my sight, in the far distant future, when the soil should yield me golden fruit for all my toil. Part 7. With much hard labor and some pleasure fraught, the months rolled by me noiselessly, that taught my hand to grow more skillful in its art, strengthened my daring dream of fame, and brought sweet hope and resignation to my heart. Brief letters came from Helen, now and then. She was quite well, oh, yes. Quite well, indeed. But still so weak and nervous. By and by, when baby, being older, should not need such constant care, she would grow strong again. She was as happy as a soul could be, no least cloud hovered in her azure sky, she had not thought life held such depths of bliss. Dear baby sent Maurine a loving kiss, and said she was a naughty, naughty girl, not to come home and see Ma's little pearl. No gift of costly jewels, or of gold, had been so precious or so dear to me, as each brief line wherein her joy was told. It lightened toil, and took the edge from pain, knowing my sacrifice was not in vain. Roy purchased fine estates in Scotland, where he built a pretty villa-like retreat. And when the Roman summer's languid heat made work a punishment, I turned my face toward the Highlands, and with Roy and Grace found rest and freedom from all thought and care. I was a willing worker. Not an hour passed idly by me, each I would employ to some good purpose, ere it glided on to swell the tide of hours forever gone. My first completed picture, known as Joy, won pleasant words of praise. Possesses power, displays much talent, very fairly done. So fell the comments on my grateful ear. Swift in the wake of Joy, and always near, walks her sad sister Sorrow. So my brush began depicting Sorrow, heavy-eyed, with pallid visage, ere the rosy flush upon the beaming face of Joy had dried. The careful study of long months, it won golden opinions, even bringing forth that certain sign of merit, a critique, which set both pieces down as daubs, and weak, as empty heads that sang their praises, so proving conclusively the picture's worth. These critics and reviewers do not use their precious ammunition to abuse a worthless work. That, left alone, they know, will find its proper level, and they aim their batteries at rising works which claim too much of public notice. But this shot resulted only in some noise, which brought a dozen people, where one came before, to view my pictures, and I had my hour of holding those frail baubles, fame and power. An English baron who had lived 20 of his allotted 60 years and 10, bought both the pieces. He was very kind, and so attentive, I, not being blind, must understand his meaning. Therefore, when he said, "Sweet friend, whom I would make my wife, the joy and sorrow this dear hand portrayed, I have in my possession, now resign into my careful keeping, and make mine the joy and sorrow of your future life," I was prepared to answer, but delayed, grown undecided suddenly. My mind argued the matter coolly pro and con, and made resolve to speed his wooing on, and grant him favor. He was good and kind, not young, no doubt he would be quite content with my respect, nor miss an ardent love, could give me ties of family and home, and then, perhaps, my mind was not above setting some value on a titled name, ambitious woman's weakness. Then my art would be encouraged and pursued the same, and I could spend my winters all in Rome. Love never more could touch my wasteful heart, that all its wealth upon one object spent. Existence would be very bleak and cold, after long years, when I was grey and old, with neither home nor children. Once a wife, I would forget the sorrow of my life, and pile new sods upon the grave of pain. My mind so argued, and my sad heart heard, but made no comment. Then the Baron spoke, and waited for my answer. All in vain, I strove for strength to utter that one word, my mind dictated. Moments rolled away, until at last my torpid heart awoke, and forced my trembling lips to say him nay. And then my eyes with sudden tears overran, in pity for myself and for this man, who stood before me, lost in pained surprise. "Dear friend," I cried, "dear generous friend, forgive a troubled woman's weakness. As I live, in truth I meant to answer otherwise. From out its store, my heart can give you naught but honor and respect, and yet methought I would give willing answer, did you sue. But now I know it were cruel wrong I planned, taking a heart that beat with love most true, and giving in exchange an empty hand. Who weds for love alone, may not be wise, who weds without it, angels must despise. Love and respect together must combine, to render marriage holy and divine, and lack of either, sure as fate, destroys continuation of the nuptial joys, and brings regret, and gloomy discontent, to put to rout each tender sentiment. Nay, nay. I will not burden all your life by that possession, an unloving wife, nor will I take the sin upon my soul, of wedding where my heart goes not in whole. However bleak may be my single lot, I will not stain my life with such a blot. Dear friend, farewell. The earth is very wide, it holds some fairer woman for your bride. I would I had a heart to give to you, but, lacking it, can only say, adieu. He whom temptation never has assailed, knows not that subtle sense of moral strength. When sorely tried, we waver, but at length, rise up and turn away, not having failed. The autumn of the third year came and went. The mild Italian winter was half spent, when this brief message came across the sea. My darling, I am dying. Come to me. Love, which so long the growing truth concealed, stands pale within its shadow. Oh, my sweet! This heart of mine grows fainter with each beat, dying with very weight of bliss. Oh, come! And take the legacy I leave to you, before these lips forevermore are dumb. In life or death, yours, Helen Dangerfield. This plaintive letter bore a month-old date, and, wild with fears lest I had come too late, I bade the old world and new friends adieu. And with Aunt Ruth, who long had sighed for home, I turned my back on glory, art, and Rome. All selfish thoughts were merged in one wild fear, that she for whose dear sake my heart had bled, rather than her sweet eyes should know one tear, was passing from me, that she might be dead, and, dying, had been sorely grieved with me, because I made no answer to her plea. Oh, ship, that sailed slowly, slowly on, make haste before a wasting life is gone. Make haste that I may catch a fleeting breath. And true in life, be true even unto death. Oh, ship, sail on. And bear me over the tide, to her for whom my woman's heart once died. Sail, sail, oh, ship! For she hath need of me, and I would know what her last wish may be. I have been true, so true, through all the past. Sail, sail, oh, ship! I would not fail at last. So prayed my heart still over, and ever over, until the weary lagging ship reached shore. All sad with fears that I had come too late, by that strange source whence men communicate, though miles on miles of space between them lie. I spoke with Vivian, does she live? Reply. The answer came. She lives, but hasten, friend. Her journey draweth swiftly to its end. Ah me! Ah me! When each remembered spot, my own dear home, the lane that led to his, the fields, the woods, the lake, burst on my sight, oh! Then, self rose up in asserting might, oh! Then, my bursting heart all else forgot, but those sweet early years of lost delight, of hope, defeat, of anguish and of bliss. I have a theory, vague, undefined, that each emotion of the human mind, love, pain or passion, sorrow or despair, is a live spirit, dwelling in the air, until it takes possession of some breast, and, when at length, grown weary of unrest, we rise up strong and cast it from the heart, and bid it leave us wholly, and depart. It does not die, it cannot die, but goes, and mingles with some restless wind that blows, about the region where it had its birth. And though we wander over all the earth, that spirit waits, and lingers, year by year, invisible, and clothed like the air, hoping that we may yet again draw near, and it may haply take us unaware, and once more find safe shelter in the breast, it stirred of old with pleasure or unrest. Told by my heart, and wholly positive, some old emotion long had ceased to live, that, were it called, it could not hear or come, because it was so voiceless and so dumb, yet, passing where it first sprang into life, my very soul has suddenly been rife, with all the old intensity of feeling. It seemed a living spirit, which came stealing into my heart from that departed day, exiled emotion, which I fancied clay. So now into my troubled heart, above the present's pain and sorrow, crept the love, and strife and passion of a bygone hour, possessed of all their olden might and power. It was but a moment, and the spell was broken, by pleasant words of greeting, gently spoken, and Vivian stood before us. But I saw, in him the husband of my friend alone. The old emotions might at times return, and smouldering fires leap up an hour and burn, but never yet had I transgressed God's law, by looking on the man I had resigned, with any hidden feeling in my mind, which she, his wife, my friend, might not have known. He was but little altered. From his face, the nonchalant and almost haughty grace, the lurking laughter waiting in his eyes. The years had stolen, leaving in their place a settled sadness, which was not despair, nor was it gloom, nor weariness, nor care, but something like the vapor over the skies of Indian summer, beautiful to see, but spoke of frosts, which had been and would be. There was that in his face which cometh not, save when the soul has many a battle fought, and conquered self by constant sacrifice. There are two sculptors, who, with chisels fine, render the plainest features half divine. All other artists strive in vain, to picture beauty perfect and complete. Their statues only crumble at their feet, without the master touch of faith and pain. And now his face, that perfect seemed before, chiseled by these two careful artists, wore a look exalted, which the spirit gives, when soul has conquered, and the body lives, subservient to its bidding. In a room, which curtained out the February gloom, and, redolent with perfume, bright with flowers, rested the eye like one of summer's bowers, I found my Helen, who was less mine now than death's, for on the marble of her brow, his seal was stamped indelibly. Her form was like the slender willow, when some storm has stripped it bare of foliage. Her face, pale always, now was ghastly in its hue, and, like two lamps, in some dark, hollow place, burned her large eyes, grown more intensely blue. Her fragile hands displayed each chord and vein, and on her mouth was that drawn look of pain, which is not uttered. Yet an inward light shone through and made her wasted features bright, with an unearthly beauty, and an awe crept over me, gazing on her, for I saw she was so near to heaven that I seemed to look upon the face of one redeemed. She turned the brilliant luster of her eyes upon me. She had passed beyond surprise, or any strong emotion linked with clay. But as I glided to her where she lay, a smile, celestial in its sweetness, wreathed her pallid features. "Welcome home," she breathed. "Dear hands. Dear lips. I touch you and rejoice." And like the dying echo of a voice, were her faint tones that thrilled upon my ear. I fell upon my knees beside her bed, all agonies within my heart were wed, while to the aching numbness of my grief, mine eyes refused the solace of a tear, the tortured soul's most merciful relief. Her wasted hand caressed my bended head, for one sad, sacred moment. Then she said, in that low tone so like the wind's refrain, "Maurine, my own, give not away to pain, the time is precious. Ere another dawn, my soul may hear the summons and pass on. Arise, sweet sister. Rest a little while, and when refreshed, come hither. I grow weak, with every hour that passes. I must speak, and make my dying wishes known tonight. Go now." And in the halo of her smile, which seemed to fill the room with golden light, I turned and left her. Later in the gloom of coming night, I entered that dim room, and sat down by her. Vivian held her hand, and on the pillow at her side, there smiled the beauteous countenance of a sleeping child. "Maurine," spoke Helen, "for 3 blissful years, my heart has dwelt in an enchanted land, and I have drank the sweetened cup of joy, without one drop of anguish or alloy. And so, ere pain embitters it with gall, or sad-eyed sorrow fills it full of tears, and bids me quaff, which is the fate of all who linger long upon this troubled way, God takes me to the realm of endless day, to mingle with his angels, who alone can understand such bliss as I have known. I do not murmur. God has heaped my measure, in 3 short years, full to the brim with pleasure, and, from the fullness of an earthly love, I pass to the immortal arms above, before I even brush the skirts of woe. I leave my aged parents here below, with none to comfort them. Maurine, sweet friend, be kind to them, and love them to the end, which may not be far distant. And I leave a soul immortal in your charge, Maurine. From this most holy, sad and sacred eve, till God shall claim her, she is yours to keep, to love and shelter, to protect and guide. She touched the slumbering cherub at her side, and Vivian gently bore her, still asleep, and laid the precious burden on my breast. A solemn silence fell upon the scene. And when the sleeping infant smiled, and pressed my yielding bosom with her waxen cheek, I felt it would be sacrilege to speak, such wordless joy possessed me. Oh! At last, this infant, who, in that tear-blotted past, had caused my soul such travail, was my own, through all the lonely coming years to be, mine own to cherish, wholly mine alone. and what I mourned so hopelessly as lost, was now restored, and given back to me. The dying voice continued, in this child, you yet have me, whose mortal life she cost. But all that was most pure and undefiled, and good within me, lives in her again. Maurine, my husband loves me, yet I know, moving about the wide world, to and from, and through, and in the busy haunts of men, not always will his heart be dumb with woe, but sometime waken to a later love. Nay, Vivian, hush! My soul has passed above all selfish feelings. I would have it so. While I am with the angels, blessed and glad, I would not have you sorrowing and sad, in loneliness go mourning to the end. But, love, I could not trust to any other, the sacred office of a foster mother, to this sweet cherub, save my own heart friend. Teach her to love her father's name, Maurine, wherever he wanders. Keep my memory green, in her young heart, and lead her in her youth, to drink from the eternal fount of truth. Vex her not with sectarian discourse, nor strive to teach her piety by force. Ply not her mind with harsh and narrow creeds, nor frighten her with an avenging God, who rules his subjects with a burning rod, but teach her that each mortal simply needs to grow in hate of hate and love of love, to gain a kingdom in the courts above. Let her be free and natural as the flowers, that smile and nod throughout the summer hours. Let her rejoice in all the joys of youth, but first impress upon her mind this truth: no lasting happiness is ever attained, save when the heart some other seeks to please. The cup of selfish pleasure soon is drained, and full of gall and bitterness the lees. Next to her God, teach her to love her land, in her young bosom light the patriot's flame, until the heart within her shall expand, with love and fervor at her country's name. No coward mother bears a valiant son. And this, my last wish, is an earnest one. Maurine, my overtaxed strength is waning, you have heard my wishes, and you will be true, in death as you have been in life, my own. Now leave me for a little while alone, with him, my husband. Dear love, I shall rest, so sweetly with no care upon my breast. Good night, Maurine, come to me in the morning. But lo! The bridegroom with no further warning, came for her at the dawning of the day. She heard his voice, and smiled, and passed away, without a struggle. Leaning over her bed, to give her greeting, I found but her clay, and Vivian bowed beside it. And I said, dear friend, my soul shall treasure thy request, and when the night of fever and unrest melts in the morning of eternity, like a freed bird, then I will come to thee. I will come to thee in the morning, sweet. I have been true, and soul with soul shall meet, before God's throne, and shall not be afraid. Thou gave me trust, and it was not betrayed. I will come to thee in the morning, dear. The night is dark. I do not know how near the morn may be of that eternal day. I can but keep my faithful watch and pray. I will come to thee in the morning, love. Wait for me on the eternal heights above. The way is troubled where my feet must climb, ere I shall tread the mountain top sublime. I will come in the morning, oh, mine own. But for a time must grope my way alone, through tears and sorrow, till the day shall dawn, and I shall hear the summons, and pass on. I will come in the morning. Rest secure. My hope is certain and my faith is sure. After the gloom and darkness of the night, I will come to thee with the morning light. 3 peaceful years slipped silently away. We dwelt together in my childhood's home, Aunt Ruth and I, and sunny-hearted May. She was a fair and most exquisite child. Her pensive face was delicate and mild, like her dead mother's, but through her dear eyes, her father smiled upon me, day by day. Afar in foreign countries did he roam, now resting under Italy's blue skies, and now with Roy in Scotland. And he sent brief, friendly letters, telling where he went, and what he saw, addressed to May or me. And I would write and tell him how she grew, and how she talked about him over the sea, in her sweet baby fashion, how she knew his picture in the album, how each day she knelt and prayed the blessed Lord would bring her own papa back to his little May. It was a warm bright morning in the spring. I sat in that same sunny portico, where I was sitting 7 years ago, when Vivian came. My eyes were full of tears, as I looked back across the checkered years. How many were the changes they had brought? Pain, death, and sorrow. But the lesson taught to my young heart had been of untold worth. I had learned how to suffer and grow strong, that knowledge which best serves us here on earth, and brings reward in heaven. Oh! How long the years had been since that June morning when I heard his step upon the walk, and yet I seemed to hear its echo still. Just then, down that same path I turned my eyes, tear-wet, and lo! The wanderer from a foreign land stood there before me, holding out his hand, and smiling with those wondrous eyes of old. To hide my tears, I ran and brought his child, but she was shy, and clung to me, when told this was Papa, for whom her prayers were said. She dropped her eyes and shook her little head, and would not by his coaxing be beguiled, or go to him. Aunt Ruth was not at home, and we two sat and talked, as strangers might, of distant countries which we both had seen. But once I thought I saw his large eyes light with sudden passion, when there came a pause in our chit-chat, and then he spoke. "Maurine, I saw a number of your friends in Rome. We talked of you. They seemed surprised, because you were not among the seekers for a name. They thought your whole ambition was for fame." "It might have been," I answered, "when my heart had nothing else to fill it. Now my art is but a recreation. I have this to love and live for, which I had not then." And, leaning down, I pressed a tender kiss upon my child's fair brow. "And yet," he said, the old light leaping to his eyes again, "and yet, Maurine, they say you might have wed a noble baron, one of many men who laid their hearts and fortunes at your feet. Why won the bravest of them no return?" I bowed my head, nor dared his gaze to meet. On cheek and brow I felt the red blood burn, and strong emotion strangled speech. He rose, and came and knelt beside me. "Sweet, my sweet," he murmured softly, "God in heaven knows how well I loved you 7 years ago. He only knows my anguish, and my grief, when your own acts forced on me the belief that I had been your plaything and your toy. Yet from his lips I since have learned that Roy held no place nearer than a friend and brother. And then a faint suspicion, undefined, of what had been, was, might be, stirred my mind, and that great love, I thought died at a blow, rose up within me, strong with hope and life. Before all heaven and the angel mother of this sweet child that slumbers on your heart, Maurine, Maurine, I claim you for my wife, mine own, forever, until death shall part." Through happy mists of upward welling tears, I leaned, and looked into his beauteous eyes. "Dear heart," I said, "if she who dwells above looks down upon us from yon azure skies, she can but bless us, knowing all these years my soul had yearned in silence for the love that crowned her life, and left mine own so bleak. I turned you from me for her fair, frail sake. For her sweet child's, and for my own, I take you back to be all mine, forevermore." Just then the child upon my breast awoke from her light sleep, and laid her downy cheek against her father as he knelt by me. And this unconscious action seemed to be a silent blessing which the mother spoke, gazing upon us from the mystic shore. Thanks for watching the channel. If you liked the video, please hit the like button. If you haven't already, please consider subscribing. Or if you would like to support the channel, please visit the link in the description to visit our Patreon page. Like the pictures in the video? Visit the link in the description to see more. Thanks again for watching.